Evelyn Carter set her mother's wedding dress on fire with her own hands. She did it in the yard in front of 40 guests while the fiddles were still playing. Because 10 minutes earlier, she had watched another woman walk down the stairs of Whitmore house, wearing it laughing with Evelyn's husband's hand resting on her waist. Evelyn did not scream. She did not weep. She struck the match and she smiled. If this story moves you, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far my stories have traveled. The trouble did not start with the fire. It started 3 hours earlier when Evelyn Carter went upstairs to fetch a shawl and found the cedar chest at the foot of her bed standing open and empty. She stood there a long moment with her hand on the lid. That chest had come down from Pennsylvania in 1789 in the back of a wagon. It had held one thing for 26 years: her mother's wedding dress. Ivory silk gone the color of cream with a hem. Her mother had stitched herself by candlelight because there was no money then for a seamstress, and Ruth Carter had been too proud to ask her neighbors. Evelyn had worn it exactly once, 4 months ago, in a church so small the congregation had to stand in the aisle. Now the chest was empty, and the tissue paper lay on the floor like something shed. She went down the back stairs. The kitchen was hot enough to take the breath out of a person. Hattie Doyle, who had cooked at Whitmore House for 11 years and had never once called Evelyn anything but ma'am, to her face was pulling a pan of biscuits and would not look up. "Hattie." "Ma'am." "Who's been in my room?" The pan went down on the table. Hattie wiped her hands on her apron twice, though they were dry. "Ma'am, I don't reckon it's my place." "Hattie." Evelyn's voice did not rise. That was the thing about Evelyn Carter that folks would remember later, long after everything else was forgotten. Her voice never rose. "Look at me." Hattie looked at her, and Evelyn saw it in the woman's face before a word was spoken. Pity. The kind of pity you give a dog that don't know yet it's been sold. "Miss Hayes come up this afternoon," Hattie said quietly. "With Mr. Whitmore. He carried the key." "He carried the key?" "Yes'm." "And she took the dress?" "He gave her the dress, ma'am." Hattie's jaw worked. "I'm sorry. I told him it wasn't right. I told him. He said a dress hanging in a box ain't doing nobody any good." Evelyn stood very still, out past the kitchen door. She could hear the fiddles starting up in the yard, and men laughing, and somebody's boy hollering after a dog. Half the county had come out for the Whitmore summer supper. 60 acres of new fence to show off and a table 40 feet long, and Nathaniel Whitmore standing at the head of it like a man who had never once in his life been told no. "Thank you, Hattie," Evelyn said. "Ma'am, mind your biscuits, they'll scorch." She walked out into the yard. She saw Clara Hayes before Clara Hayes saw her. Clara was coming down the front steps with a glass of punch in one hand, and the silk caught the low sun, and for about half a heartbeat, Evelyn's whole body forgot how to work. Her mother's hem. Her mother's tiny crooked stitching the part where Ruth Carter's eyes had gone bad, and she'd sewn it anyway. Somebody had taken it in at the waist. Somebody had cut it. Clara laughed at something a man said, and put her hand on the banister, and the dress moved the way it had moved in that little church in April. Evelyn walked across the yard. People stepped aside for her. She didn't notice. She came to the bottom of the steps and stopped, and Clara Hayes looked down, and her smile faltered, maybe a quarter of an inch. "Evelyn," Clara said warmly. "There you are. I was just telling Judge Ammons. Take it off." The fiddles kept playing. Nobody more than 10 feet away heard a thing. Clara's chin came up. I beg your pardon. That dress belonged to my mother. She was buried 3 years ago, and it is the only thing of hers I have got left in this world." Evelyn's hands were perfectly steady at her sides. "Take it off, Miss Hayes." "Nathaniel gave it to me." "Nathaniel didn't own it. He owns everything in that house." "Not that." Clara came down 2 more steps close enough that Evelyn could smell rosewater on her. And then Clara said the thing, softly. Kindly almost, that was the cruelty of it, that she said it kindly, the way you'd explain something to a child who'd wandered into a room where the grown folks were talking. Honey, Clara said, you weren't married, you were purchased. Go on and look at what he paid for. It wasn't you. Evelyn did not move. Somewhere behind her, a man laughed too loud at a joke, and a woman called for her children, and the whole hot summer evening went right on turning like nothing at all had happened. Where is he? Evelyn said. She found her husband in the office at the back of the house with the window open and his coat off, and two men she didn't know standing over the desk with their hats in their hands. Nathaniel Whitmore was 32 years old and had the kind of face that made men listen and women forgive. He'd inherited 900 acres at 24 and doubled it by 30. He did not raise his voice either. That was one of the few things they had in common. He looked up when she came in. Evelyn, we're occupied. Get out, Evelyn said to the two men. The men looked at Nathaniel. That more than anything else was the shape of her life in that house, that two strangers standing in her home would look past her to a man for permission to breathe. Nathaniel tipped his head an inch. The men went out. One of them had the decency to say ma'am on the way past. She waited until the door shut. You gave her my mother's dress. I gave her a dress. You went into my room. You opened my chest. It's my house, Evelyn. It's my mother. Her voice still did not rise. But something in it changed, and Nathaniel Whitmore heard it, and for the first time in 4 months, he actually set down his pen. She stitched that hem herself. She was going blind. She sat by the fire for 6 weeks because she wanted her daughter to have one beautiful thing that no man ever paid for. And you handed it to Clara Hayes so she could wear it down my staircase in front of the whole county. You're making a spectacle. I am the only person in this house who is not making a spectacle. He stood up, and that was when she saw what was on the desk under his hand. She would think about that moment for the rest of her life. How it was not the dress that broke her. The dress was a wound. What was on that desk was a killing. Paper. Old paper soft at the folds in her father's brown ink. She knew the hand the way she knew her own name Josiah Carter had written like a man arguing with the page. The Carter deed, 412 acres in the bottomland along Marrow Creek. The last piece of her father left above ground. And beside it, a bill of sale half-drafted with a figure on it, and a buyer's name she didn't recognize. Evelyn walked around the desk and picked it up before he could put a hand on it. Evelyn. She read it twice. 206 acres, she said. Half. You're selling half of Marrow Creek. Put that down. To a man in Richmond who has never set foot on it. Put it down. She looked up at him. My father, she said, cleared that bottomland with 3 hired men and a mule and his own 2 hands. He wouldn't buy a human being to do it for him, and half the county laughed at him for it, and he did it anyway. He died in that field, Nathaniel, in April, face down in his own oats. And I promised him. And here for the first and only time that whole evening her voice cracked, one hairline crack straight through the middle of it. I promised him I would hold it. Nathaniel Whitmore looked at his wife, and then he said the words that finished it. You married into this family, he said, because your land was valuable. Silence. Out in the yard the fiddles went into a reel, and 40 people clapped along in time. Say that again, Evelyn said. You heard me. I want to be certain I heard you. Then hear it plain. He wasn't cruel about it. He was reasonable. That was worse. Your father died in debt. Your mother's people wouldn't take you. You had 400 acres of good bottomland, and no man to work it, and no money to hire one, and the bank in Lynchburg was 6 months from putting a notice on your gate. I married you. Your creditors were satisfied inside of a fortnight. You have a roof, a name, and a place at my table. He shrugged one shoulder. It was a fair arrangement, Evelyn. I've never lied to you about what it was. You lied to yourself. And Clara Hayes. Clara is not your concern. She's wearing my mother on her back. Then I'll buy you 6 dresses. Evelyn laughed. It came out of her before she could stop it, one short broken sound, and she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. Not weeping. She was past weeping. She had gone through weeping and out the other side into a country she had never been to before, cold and clear and very quiet. 6 dresses, she said. Evelyn, you truly do not understand what you did. I understand you're overwrought. And there are 60 guests in my yard. Your yard. Yes. And Marrow Creek. He hesitated. Half a second. She saw it and filed it away because Evelyn Carter had spent her whole life reading men who thought she wasn't reading anything at all. The sale will be concluded Friday, he said. It will not. It's my signature on the deed, Evelyn. It's my father's name on the land. Names, Nathaniel said, don't hold ground. Deeds do. He took the bill of sale out of her hand. She let him. Then she walked out of the office, down the hall, out the front door, past Judge Ammons, and past the long table, and past the fiddlers, and she went to the woodpile by the smokehouse and picked up the tin of lucifer matches off the shelf where Hattie kept them, and she turned around and walked back. Clara Hayes was in the middle of the yard dancing. Evelyn came up behind her and took her by the wrist. Come with me. Let go of me. Come with me, Miss Hayes, or I will take it off you in front of every soul here, and I don't believe either one of us wants that. Something in Evelyn's face must have been very convincing. They went behind the smokehouse. Clara was talking the entire way. You're mad. You're absolutely mad. Nathaniel will hear of this, and Evelyn did not answer her once. Behind the smokehouse, Evelyn turned around and held out her hand. The dress. You can't be serious. I have got a knife in the kitchen and about 9 seconds of patience left in me. Take it off. Clara took it off. She stood there in her shift with her arms crossed over herself, shaking, and Evelyn saw distantly the way you'd notice weather that the woman was frightened. Genuinely frightened. And also that under the fright there was something else, something older and sadder, the look of a person who has done a low thing and knows it and has already begun the long business of explaining it to herself. He'd have thrown it out, Clara said. That's what he said to me. He said it was moldering in a box. He said, I didn't know it was your mother's. A pause. He didn't tell me. Evelyn took the dress in both arms. The silk was still warm from another woman's body. That was the detail. 20 years on, that was the one she couldn't put down, that it was warm. Get inside, Miss Hayes, she said. You'll catch your death. Then she walked out into the middle of the yard, into the space between the long table and the fiddlers, and she stopped where every single person could see her. The music died raggedly, a fiddle at a time. 60 people turned around. Evelyn Carter held her mother's wedding dress up in both hands so the whole county could see what it was, and she took out a match. Evelyn. Nathaniel was on the porch steps. He came down them fast. Evelyn, don't you? She struck the match on the sole of her shoe. The silk went up like it had been waiting 26 years for the chance. It went up white, and then gold, and then a hard hot orange, and she held it as long as she could stand to, and then let it fall, and it burned on the packed dirt of the Whitmore yard in front of Judge Ammons and the Ammons girls and the Bufords and the Coles and the preacher from Amherst Courthouse. And every soul who had ever said poor thing, at least she landed soft. Nobody moved. Nathaniel stopped 4 feet from her. Have you lost your mind? He said, not a question, quiet and white around the mouth. No, sir, Evelyn said. I have just now got it back. That dress was it was worth everything, and now it's worth nothing, and neither one of those numbers was ever yours to say. She was watching it burn. Her face in the firelight was perfectly calm. You gave away the last thing my mother made, so I gave it to God. Now nobody wears it. Not her, not me, not you. You did this in front of the entire county. I did. She turned and looked at him then. You want to know the difference between us, Nathaniel? You are standing there worrying what these people will say about you tomorrow. I stopped caring what they say about me at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Somebody way at the back said, "Oh my Lord," into the silence. And then Samuel Brooks stepped forward. Samuel Brooks had been steward of Whitmore land for 19 years, 45 years old, built like a fence post, a Bible in his saddlebag, and about 2 teaspoons of forgiveness in him for anybody. He had run that place for 2 masters, and he had never in his life taken an order from a woman. "Mr. Whitmore," he said with respect, "say the word and I'll have the buggy hitched. She can be at her aunt's in Bedford by morning and folks'll say she took sick. Thank you, Samuel, Evelyn said. I'm not going to Bedford. Wasn't talking to you, ma'am. No, Evelyn agreed. You never have been. Brooks's neck went red. You want to know what I think? I know what you think, Mr. Brooks. You've been kind enough to make it plain since April. You think I'm a girl playing at being mistress of a house. You think when I asked to see the ledgers in May, I was being nosy, and when I asked why the Tolliver family got paid in scrip instead of coin, I was being troublesome, and when I asked where 200 bushels of last year's wheat went, I was being— She tilted her head. What was your word? Hysterical. The yard had gone dead quiet in a new way. A listening way. Brooks's jaw set. Mr. Whitmore, I don't have to stand. 200 bushels, Evelyn said. Evelyn, Nathaniel said. It's in the book, Nathaniel. Or rather it isn't, and that's the whole trouble. She looked back at Brooks. You want me on a buggy to Bedford awful bad tonight, Mr. Brooks. A man might start to wonder why. Brooks took a step toward her, and a boy's voice said, You best not. Everybody turned. It was Amos Tolliver. 16 years old, a tenant's son, hired for the summer hay, standing at the edge of the lamplight with his hat crushed in both fists and his whole body shaking with the enormity of what he had just done. A hired boy speaking out of turn in front of the county. His father grabbed his arm. Amos. She come out to our place in June, Amos said louder. When Ma was down with the fever, wasn't nobody else come. She brought the quinine her own self, and she set up with Ma 2 nights, and she never told a soul about it. His chin was trembling. So he best not put his hand on her, that's all. That's all I got to say. Silence. Then Hattie Doyle, standing in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder, said clear as a bell. She come to my sister's too. Somebody else said, and the Reeds. Nathaniel Whitmore stood in his own yard and looked at his wife like a man who had walked past a door in his own house for 4 months and only now noticed there was a whole room behind it. Evelyn didn't look triumphant. She looked tired. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, I've spoiled your supper and I'm sorry for it. The table's still full. Please eat. Mr. Whitmore and I have some business to settle. And she turned and walked into the house and left them all standing there in the dark with the smell of burning silk. He came in 20 minutes later. She was in the office. She had lit 2 lamps and pulled the ledger down off the shelf, and she was sitting in his chair with a pen in her hand and a sheet of foolscap in front of her covered top to bottom in figures. Nathaniel shut the door. Get out of my chair. In a moment. Evelyn. 940 acres, Evelyn said without looking up. 220 in wheat, 140 in corn, the rest timber pasture, and whatever that swampy piece by the north line is, that nobody's touched since your father's time. 19 tenant families. 11 hired hands, 7 of them owed back wages, 3 of them owed since February. She turned a page. You are $1,200 in arrears to the mercantile at Amherst Courthouse. Your note at the Lynchburg Bank comes due in November. And your steward has been paying the tenants in store scrip drawn on his own brother-in-law's counter for 2 years, which means every family on this land has been buying their own flour back at a 40% markup out of money you already paid them. Nathaniel didn't move. That's a serious accusation. It's arithmetic. She set down the pen. Which is why he wanted me in a buggy to Bedford, and why you're selling Marrow Creek. I'm selling Marrow Creek because I need $8,000 by November. You need $6,200, and you'd get it out of the timber on the north line inside of 2 seasons, if anyone in this house had ever bothered to walk it. There's no road to the north line. There's a road to Buford's Mill, and the north line is 1.5 miles from Buford's Mill, and Buford is 71 years old and wants to sell. Evelyn finally looked up. I've been walking this land since May, Nathaniel, every acre of it, while you were in Richmond. He stared at her. Why, he said slowly, would you do that? And Evelyn Carter said the truest thing she had ever said to her husband. Because I thought it was going to be my home. He sat down. Not in the chair she had the chair. On the edge of the desk, which she noted because in 4 months he had never once put himself lower than her in a room. The sale goes through Friday, he said. But it came out different than it had before. Then hear me first. Evelyn. You owe me 10 minutes. You took my mother's dress and my father's ground in the same afternoon. 10 minutes, Nathaniel. A long pause. Talk. She turned the ledger around and pushed it toward him. Marrow Creek bottomland floods every 4 or 5 years. That's why it's the richest dirt in this county, and that's why my father bought it, and that's why the man from Richmond wants it cheap, because he thinks nobody but a fool would farm a floodplain, and he's going to hold it and sell it to the canal men in 5 years when they come through. She tapped the page. You're not selling him land. You're selling him the creek. And when he owns the creek, he owns the water for every farm on this side of the ridge, including yours, and the day he decides to dam it or ditch it, the 19 families out there in your fields have got nothing to drink and nothing to irrigate, and you have got 900 acres of very expensive dust. Nathaniel Whitmore read the page. Then he read it again. Who told you that? He said. My father. When I was 11. He sat me on the fence and made me repeat it back until I had it by heart. A small bitter breath. He had 2 sons, and they both died before they were 4, and I was what was left, so he taught me the way he'd have taught them. He used to say, Evie, a man can take your money, and a fire can take your house, but nobody on God's earth can take what you know. The lamp hissed. Everybody in the county thought Josiah Carter was ridiculous, she said quietly. Teaching a girl drainage. Teaching a girl to read a ledger and price timber and talk to a mill. They laughed at him at church suppers. He didn't care. She looked straight at her husband. And you married that girl for 400 acres, and you never once asked her a single question about them. Nathaniel said nothing. Not one question, Evelyn said. In 4 months. He closed the ledger. If what you say about Brooks is true, it's true. Then I'll look into it. You'll look into it. Yes. Nathaniel. She stood up. You will not look into it. You'll ask Samuel Brooks whether Samuel Brooks is a thief, and Samuel Brooks will say no, sir, and you'll believe him because he's ridden beside you since you were 13 years old, and I've been in this house since April. That is exactly how it will go, and you know it, and I know it. Then what do you propose? And there it was. The question. The first real question he had ever asked her. Evelyn had been waiting for it since about 6:30 that evening, and she had her answer ready, and she gave it to him flat. Give me the fields. What? Give me the fields. All of them. 90 days. From now until the 1st of October. She counted it off on her fingers, calm as a woman ordering flour. I'll run the accounts. I'll run the tenants. I'll run the hands and the harvest and the mill business. You keep your name on everything. You keep the Richmond men. You keep the house and the horses and Miss Hayes and whatever else you like. I don't want any of it. You're not serious. I have never been more serious in my life. You're 24 years old. I was 23 when my father died, and I brought that harvest in alone, with 3 hired men, and the Carter place made a profit that year, which is more than this one did. She held his eyes. Look it up. It's in the county book. You can ride into Amherst tomorrow and check me. Nathaniel Whitmore laughed. Once. Not kindly. And what do I get Evelyn in this arrangement of yours? $6,200 by the 1st of November and no sale. The laugh stopped. And what do you get? Marrow Creek. She said it without a flicker. The deed. In my name. Not yours, not ours, mine. Signed, witnessed, and filed at the courthouse. A married woman can't hold land in her own name. She can if her husband executes a deed of trust with a trustee. Judge Ammons is sitting at your table right now eating your ham. He'll draw it in an hour. A beat. I told you. My father taught me. Nathaniel stood up off the desk. He walked to the window. He stood there a long while with his back to her, and she let him because Evelyn had learned young that the loudest thing in any room is a woman who has finished talking. And if you fail, he said finally, then you sell Marrow Creek in October instead of Friday, and you're 4 months' interest poorer, and you'll have got a summer's work out of me for free. You lose almost nothing. She paused. And I'll go, quietly. No spectacle. I'll be on that buggy to Bedford myself, and you'll never hear my name again. They'll say I let my wife run my land. Yes. Do you know what that does to a man in this county? I know exactly what it does, Evelyn said. I've watched what this county does to a woman for 24 years. Nathaniel, so forgive me if I can't work up much sympathy for what it might do to you." He turned around, and something moved behind his face, the first crack hairline so small she almost missed it. Not softness. Not yet. Something more like a man seeing a hand of cards he'd been playing against for 4 months and only now realizing he'd never once looked at it. "Why stay?" he said. "That's what I don't understand. Any other woman in Virginia would be gone by morning. I've given you cause. I've given you cause 10 times over. Why in God's name would you stay?" Evelyn thought about it. She could have lied. She could have said something about duty, or the Lord, or the vows they'd spoken in that crowded little church. She told him the truth instead, and it came out harder than she meant it to. "Because if I leave, you'll sell it," she said. "And in 10 years, those 19 families will be gone off that bottom land, and there'll be a canal cut through my father's oats, and a man in Richmond, who never smelled that dirt, will make $40,000 off a thing that killed my father to build." Her hands were shaking now finally, now that it was almost over. "I'm not staying for you, Nathaniel. Don't you ever think that. I'm not staying for this house or your name or one thing you own. I'm staying because that ground is the only argument I have left that my father's life mattered, and I will not let you spend it." Silence. Down the hall. Faintly somebody was still playing a fiddle. Nathaniel Whitmore looked at his wife for a long, long moment. 90 days, he said. Evelyn's breath went out of her. 90 days, she agreed. Brooks stays. Brooks stays where I can see him. He answers to me. He won't. Then that's his difficulty. Evelyn. And for the first time he sounded almost human, almost tired. Those men out there will not take an order from you. I know. Then how do you propose? I don't intend to give them orders, Evelyn said. I intend to give them their back wages, in coin, tomorrow morning, out of the house money, which I'll thank you to sign over tonight, and which will cost you $311 and buy you the first honest day's work this place has seen in 2 years. He stared at her. $311.40. I've had the figure since June. She picked up her pen again. I've been waiting for somebody to ask. The paper was drawn that night at the long table by lamplight, with Judge Ammons squinting over his spectacles and half the county still standing around the yard, pretending they weren't listening. Ammons read it twice before he'd write it. Nathaniel, he said, you sure about this, son? Write it, Judge. It's your land. I'm aware whose land it is. Ammons looked over the top of his spectacles at Evelyn, a girl in a plain gray dress with soot on both hands, and her hair coming down, and something old and shrewd moved in the man's face. Josiah Carter's daughter, he said. Yes, sir. I bought oats off your daddy for 11 years. I know it, sir. I wrote the receipts from the time I was 9. The judge grunted. So you did, he said. So you did. And he dipped his pen. Nathaniel signed it. Then he held the pen out to her, and Evelyn Carter took it, and she signed her own name under her husband's, on a piece of paper that gave a 24-year-old woman the running of 940 acres of Virginia in the summer of 1815. Her hand did not shake. Samuel Brooks watched from 20 feet away, with his hat in his hands and his face like a shut door. When it was done, he came forward. Mr. Whitmore, a word. Say it here, Samuel. Brooks's eyes went to Evelyn and back. 19 years, he said. 19 years I've run this ground for your family. I buried your daddy. I taught you to seat a horse. His voice had gone rough. And you're handing it to a girl over a dress. I'm handing it to her over $6,000, Nathaniel said. She'll ruin you inside of a month. Then she'll ruin me inside of a month, and you'll have the satisfaction of it. Brooks turned to Evelyn, and he said low, so only she could hear it, and he said it almost gently, which was the thing that told her he meant every syllable. You're going to want to be careful, ma'am. Country like this, long ways between houses, creeks run high in the summer. He put his hat on. Accidents happen out here to folks that go walking where they oughtn't. Evelyn Carter looked up at him. Mr. Brooks, she said, I want the payroll book on that desk by 6 o'clock in the morning. Every page. And if one page is missing, I won't ask you about it. I'll ask the judge." Brooks's jaw flexed. 6 o'clock, Evelyn said. "Good night." The guests were gone by 11. Evelyn went out alone to the middle of the yard where there was a black patch of scorched dirt about the size of a wagon wheel, and she knelt down in it in her good gray dress and put her hands in the ash. It was still warm. She stayed there a while. "I'm sorry, Mama," she said out loud to nobody. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't let her keep it." Behind her, the porch board creaked. She didn't turn around. She knew the sound of his boots by now. "You'll ruin that dress," Nathaniel said. "It's already ruined." She wiped her hands slowly on her skirt and stood up. "There's ash in the wool. Won't ever come out." He was standing on the bottom step with his hands in his pockets. "You could have come to me," he said. "About Brooks, about the wheat, any of it. You could have come to me in May." Evelyn almost smiled. "I did," she said. 4 times. He opened his mouth. Then he shut it. "You said," she recited it evenly without heat, the way you'd read something off a page, the first time that you'd look at it Sunday. The second time that Brooks had the running of it. The third time that you had guests. And the fourth time, you didn't say anything at all, Nathaniel, because you were reading a letter and you never looked up." He stood there in the dark. "I didn't know," he said. "No." Evelyn agreed. "You didn't." And that she thought walking past him up the steps and into the house that was not hers and never had been was the whole trouble with men like Nathaniel Whitmore. Not that they were wicked. Wicked would have been simpler. Wicked she'd have known what to do with. It was that they didn't know. They had never once in their lives had to. She climbed the stairs. She washed the ash off her hands in the basin and watched the water go gray. And then she sat down at the little writing desk by the window with the payroll figures in her head and a candle burning low, and she began to write in a small, steady hand a list of 19 names. Every family on that land. What they were owed. What they were owed back. What she was going to say to each one of them when she walked into their yard at 7 o'clock the next morning with a canvas sack of coin and no man beside her. She wrote until 3. When she finally put out the candle, she said one more thing into the dark, and it was not a prayer exactly, though it came out of the same place a prayer comes out of. "All right, Daddy," Evelyn Carter said. "Let's go to work." The payroll book was on the desk at 6 o'clock in the morning, and 11 pages were missing. Evelyn found them gone before she'd finished her first cup of coffee. She turned the book sideways and held it up to the window, and there they were, the stubs cut clean with a knife not torn. A man in a hurry tears. A man who means to keep his hands looking clean cuts. Hattie Doyle stood in the doorway with the coffee pot. "He come in at 5:30, Hattie said. Set it down, never said a word. Was he carrying anything else? Saddlebag. Full or flat? Hattie thought about it. Full, ma'am. Evelyn closed the book. Then he's ridden to Amherst Courthouse to see his brother-in-law, and by dinner time, the store ledger will match this one page for page, and it will be a beautiful thing to look at. She stood. Hattie, I need the canvas sack out of the pantry and every coin in this house. Mr. Whitmore counted that money last night. He counted it, and he signed it over to me at 11:40, and Judge Ammons put his name under it as witness. Evelyn was already tying her bonnet. $311.40. Bring it. Ma'am? Hattie didn't move. Can I say something out of turn? You've earned about a year's worth. Them men out there ain't going to take money from your hand. I know it. They'll take it, Hattie said, and then they'll go right on doing what Brooks tells them, because Brooks'll still be here come winter, and you might not be. Evelyn stopped with the bonnet strings in her fingers. That, she said, is the smartest thing anybody has said to me since April. So what are you fixing to do? I'm going to pay 19 families what they're owed, Evelyn said. And then I'm going to ask them for something, and the asking is the part that matters. Get the sack. She was at the Tolliver place by 7:20. Reuel Tolliver came out of the barn with a pitchfork still in his hand, and stopped dead in the middle of his own yard when he saw who it was. Behind him, his wife came to the door and pulled her shawl across her chest, and there was Amos, 16 years old, and looking like he'd rather be dead than seen. "Mr. Tolliver?" "Ma'am." He didn't set down the fork. "I've come about your wages." "We've been paid. You've been paid in paper drawn on Deacon Pike's counter, which is worth 80 cents on the dollar the day you get it, and 60 by the time the flour comes in." She untied the sack. "How much are you carrying?" Tolliver's face went dark. "I don't discuss my business in the yard." "Then let's discuss it on the porch." "Ma'am." $41, Evelyn said. "That's what I've got you down for. 22 in back wages from February and 19 in the difference between what you earned and what that script bought you. If my figure's wrong, I want to hear it because I'd rather be corrected in your yard than found out in November." Nobody said anything. Then Amos said quiet, "It's 43, ma'am." "Amos," his father said. "It's 43. She said tell her if she's wrong." The boy's ears were scarlet. "There was 2 days in March you worked the ditch that Mr. Brooks never wrote down." Evelyn opened the sack and counted out $43 into her own palm and held it out. Reuel Tolliver looked at that money the way a man looks at a snake in a woodpile. "What do you want for it?" he said. 90 days of honest work and one favor." "There it is." "There it is," Evelyn agreed. "The favor's this. Sometime this week Samuel Brooks is going to come to you and tell you the mistress has lost her senses, and to sit on your hands and wait it out, and he'll say it kindly, and he'll be right that it's the safest thing you could do." She kept her hand out. "When he does, I don't want you to fight him. I don't want you to argue. I just want you to come tell me what he said." "You're asking me to inform on a man. I'm asking you to tell the truth to the person who's paying you. And when you're gone come October and he's still steward and I've got 4 children. Then you'll have $43 and a bad memory of me," Evelyn said, "and I won't hold it against you. But Mr. Tolliver, I've been in your house, in June, when your wife was so hot with the fever her hair was wet through. I sat in that chair right yonder, and I didn't ask you for one thing then, and you'd have given it if I had." Tolliver's jaw moved. His wife spoke from the doorway. "Take the money, Reuel. Mary, take the money." Her voice cracked on it. "She come out here at night with quinine when the steward wouldn't send a boy with a bucket of water. Take the money and tell her what she wants to know." He took the money. He counted it because he was that kind of man, and when he was done, he looked up and said, "He come by last night, 11 o'clock. Evelyn went very still. "Brooks said there'd be a new arrangement in a week or two, and not to get comfortable." Tolliver's throat worked. "Said the place was going to be sold anyhow, and them that made trouble wouldn't be kept on by the new owner." "The new owner?" "That's what he said, ma'am. The new owner, like there was already one." By 10 o'clock, she had been to 7 houses, and the story had run ahead of her like fire in dry grass, so that at the 8th house the woman was standing in the road waiting with her apron twisted in both hands, and at the 11th, a man came at a run across a hayfield hollering, Ma'am, hold up." By noon, she had paid out $286 and heard the words "the new owner" 4 more times. She rode back into the yard at 12:30, and Nathaniel Whitmore was standing on the steps with his coat on and his horse saddled behind him. "Where have you been?" "Working." "Judge Ammon stopped by." "That was quick of him." "He says the deed of trust wants a description of the parcel filed at the courthouse, or it isn't worth the paper." Nathaniel came down a step. "He also says there's a man at the Eagle in Amherst asking after the Whitmore acreage. Been there since Tuesday." Evelyn swung down off the horse. "Tuesday," she said. "Tuesday. You drafted that bill of sale Wednesday." "I did." "So he was in the county before you decided to sell." She looped the rein over the rail. "Nathaniel who came to who?" He didn't answer right away, and that was answer enough. "He wrote me in May," Nathaniel said finally. "A Mr. Ansel Croft. He'd heard of the property." "Heard of it from whom?" "How the devil should I know? Because a man in Richmond does not simply hear that a plantation 200 miles away has a floodplain worth having," Evelyn said. "Somebody told him. Somebody who'd walked it. Somebody who knew where the creek runs and what the bottom yields and exactly how much you owed the Lynchburg bank. She was watching his face. You told me the note comes due in November. Who else knows that number? My attorney. The bank. A pause. Brooks. Brooks. Evelyn the man has been in my family since before I could shave. 11 pages, Evelyn said. What? 11 pages are cut out of your payroll book, not torn. Cut. February to April of last year and September to December before that. She pulled her gloves off finger by finger. And he's gone to Amherst Courthouse this morning with a full saddlebag to sit with Deacon Pike and get their stories to match, and he told Ruel Tolliver at 11 o'clock last night that there was already a new owner. Nathaniel's face changed. Not much. A quarter of an inch the same as Clara's smile on the stairs. Get your horse, Evelyn said. Where? Amherst Courthouse. You're going to ask Deacon Pike to see 2 years of store accounts, and he's going to tell you no, because he can tell me no all day long and enjoy it. He can't tell you no. And if I do this, then in about 3 hours you'll know whether I'm a hysterical girl who burned a dress, Evelyn said, or whether the man you'd trust with your life has been selling you by the acre for 2 years. Nathaniel Whitmore stood there in the heat with his hand on his saddle. And if it comes back clean, he said, then I'll apologize to Samuel Brooks in front of every hand on this place on my feet, and I'll say the words I was wrong out loud, where they can all hear it. Evelyn met his eyes. I'll do it too. I'm not too proud. I'm just right. He rode out at 1. I was back at 6, and he didn't come to the house first. He went to the barn, and he stood in there in the dark for a while, and when he finally came across the yard, Evelyn was on the porch with the ledger in her lap, and she knew before he opened his mouth. He sat down on the top step with his back to her. $240 a year, he said. Say it again. $240 a year paid quarterly into an account in Samuel Brooks's wife's maiden name drawn on a house in Richmond. His voice had no shape to it at all. Pike showed me. He wasn't even ashamed. He thought I knew Evelyn. He thought it was some arrangement of mine. He asked me was the sale going through Friday because he'd been told to lay in stock for a new crew. Evelyn set the ledger down. There's more, Nathaniel said. Tell me. He didn't just tell Croft about Merrow Creek. Nathaniel turned around then, and for the first time since she had known him, Nathaniel Whitmore looked like a man who had been hit. Croft's been buying the ridge, quiet. 4 small places since March. Buford's mill has an offer on it. The Reed farm's got an offer on it. He's not after my land, Evelyn. He's after the water exactly like you said at that desk, and I sat there and let you say it, and I thought it was a clever thing for a woman to have worked out. Nathaniel, I laughed at you. He said it flat. In my own office, 12 hours ago. Where is Brooks now? At the Eagle, with Croft. He rubbed his face with both hands. They were at the same table. I walked in, and they didn't even stand up. Evelyn was quiet a long moment. Then we've got until Friday, she said, and we don't have Buford's timber, and we don't have $6,000. And by tomorrow night, every hand on this place is going to have heard from Samuel Brooks that the ship's going down. So what do we do? She looked up sharply. It was the first time he had said we. You, she said, are going to sleep. And at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, you're going to ride to Buford's mill with me, and you are not going to say one word the entire time. Ezra Buford was 71 years old and had been running water through his mill since Jefferson's first term, and he came out onto the porch of that mill house at 5:30 in the morning in his nightshirt with a fowling piece in the crook of his arm. Whoever you are, you're early. Mr. Buford, it's Josiah Carter's daughter. The old man squinted into the dark. Well, I'll be damned, he said, and put the gun down. He gave them coffee that could have stripped paint, and he sat in a chair that had been his father's, and he listened, and Nathaniel Whitmore stood by the door for 1 solid hour and never said a word, which Evelyn considered the single greatest act of discipline she had ever witnessed from him. So the Richmond fellows offered me $1,800, Buford said at last. He has. And you want me to turn it down. I want you to tell me what he offered you it for. Buford scratched his jaw. Said he'd keep me on as miller. Said the family could stay in the house. For how long? Didn't say. Was it in writing? The old man's hand stopped moving. No, he said slowly. No, ma'am, it was not. Mr. Buford, in 11 years, my father sold you oats and you sold him meal, and neither one of you ever wrote a contract. And that was fine, because you were going to be in that chair and he was going to be in that field until one of you died, and you both knew it. Evelyn leaned forward. Ansel Croft is going to be in Richmond. He will be a name on a paper in a drawer 200 miles from here. And when the man he hires to run this mill decides your family's house would suit him better, there will be nothing at all, not one word on one page to stop him. Buford stared into his coffee. I got a granddaughter sleeping upstairs, he said. I know it. $1,800 is a great deal of money to an old man. It is. What are you offering me? Nothing, Evelyn said. Nathaniel's head came up. I haven't got $1,800, Mr. Buford. I haven't got 800. What I've got is 940 acres, with 160 of standing white oak on the north line that nobody has touched since 1791, and no road to get it out. She set her cup down. You've got a mill and a road, and no timber worth cutting inside of 4 miles. I'm proposing we cut mine, run it through yours, and split it 60 to me, 40 to you, on every board foot for 5 years in writing, signed and filed at the courthouse, where a judge can find it. 40%, Buford said. 40% of 160 acres of white oak, Mr. Buford, with the canal men coming, and every town between here and Lynchburg building. You'll clear your 1,800 in 2 seasons, and you'll still own your mill and your house and your granddaughter's bedroom at the end of it. And the road. 1.5 miles. My tenants will cut it. Your tenants will cut 1.5 miles of road in summer, with the hay standing. The old man barked a laugh. Ma'am, I've farmed 60 years. Ain't a man alive going to leave his hay to build another fellow's road. They will if they own a piece of it, Evelyn said. Silence. Say that again, Buford said. 2% of my 60, she said, divided 19 ways among every tenant family that puts a man on that road. Written into the contract. Their names in it, not wages shares. Nathaniel spoke for the first time in an hour. Evelyn. Not now. You cannot put 19 tenant families into a timber contract. Why not? Because it isn't done. Neither is a woman running 900 acres, Evelyn said, and yet here we are at 6:30 in the morning. Ezra Buford laughed until he had to wipe his eyes. Josiah Carter, he said, used to sit right there in that chair and tell me his girl was smarter than any 3 men in this county, and I used to think, well, he's her daddy, he's obliged to say so. He put out his hand. Draw it up. I'll sign it Thursday. They rode back with the sun coming up behind them, and neither one of them said anything for 2 miles. Then Nathaniel said, You could have asked me first. About what? The shares. That's my land they'd be taking a cut of. It's your land I'm keeping you from losing. That is not the point, and you know it isn't. Then say what the point is. The point, Nathaniel said, is that you did not ask. Evelyn pulled her horse up in the middle of the road. You're right, she said. He hadn't expected that. She watched him not expect it. I should have asked you. It's your name on the deed and your father's grave on that hill, and I made a decision at another man's table, without turning my head to look at you. She said it plain, no bend in it. I'm sorry for it. And I'd do it again, because if I'd turned around, you'd have said it isn't done, and Buford would have signed with Croft, and by Christmas there'd be a dam on that creek. But I should have asked and I didn't, and you're owed that much. Nathaniel sat his horse and looked at her. You are, he said, the most exhausting person I have ever met in my life. I've been told. By whom? My father. Every day from about the age of 6. Something happened at the corner of his mouth that was very nearly a smile, and then it went away, because they came over the rise and saw the hands standing in the yard, all of them. 19 tenants and 11 hired men in a loose knot by the barn, and Samuel Brooks in the middle of them with his hat off talking. He stopped when he saw the horses. Morning, Mr. Whitmore. He put the hat back on. Ma'am. Samuel. Boys have got some questions. I'm sure they do. Evelyn dismounted before Nathaniel could get to her. Go on and ask them then. Nobody moved. "Somebody ask," she said. A hired man, near the back. Coy Meacham, 30 years old, a good hand and a worse gambler, cleared his throat. "Mr. Brooks says the place is sold." "Mr. Brooks is mistaken. Says there's papers." There were papers. They were to be concluded tomorrow. They will not be concluded tomorrow or any other day this year. And if any man doubts me, he can ride to Amherst Courthouse and ask Judge Ammons what he wrote out at that table Saturday night in front of 60 witnesses. Evelyn's voice carried without ever getting loud. "Anything else?" "He says you can't hold ground." "I can't. It's held in trust by the judge in my name and to my use, and it will stand up in any court in Virginia, and Mr. Brooks knows that, which is why he said can't instead of don't." Brooks's face didn't change. "He says we won't get paid," Meacham said. "Coy, you were paid at 9 o'clock yesterday morning, in coin, in your hand." "Yes'm." "How much?" $61. "Owed since when?" Meacham looked at his boots. "February," he said. "And who was steward in February?" That landed. She heard it land a shift in 30 men's feet small, but she heard it. Brooks spoke up easy and warm the way a man does when he's about to knife you. "Now that money come out of the house account," he said, "which is Mr. Whitmore's money, which he'd have paid out in June regular like always, and the ladies took credit for a thing that was already coming. That's all I'd say about it." "That's fair," Evelyn said. Brooks blinked. "That's a fair thing to say," she repeated. "It was Mr. Whitmore's money. I never claimed otherwise. Mr. Brooks. While I've got you in front of everybody, I'd like to ask you a question, and I'd like you to answer it out loud." "Ask it." "Deacon Pike's store, is he your wife's brother?" "Everybody knows that." "And the script these men have been paid in for 2 years that's drawn on his counter?" "It's an accommodation. Ain't enough coin in this county to—" $240 a year, Evelyn said. Brooks stopped. "Paid quarterly," she went on in exactly the same tone she'd used to say, "That's fair, into an account in your wife's maiden name, drawn on a banking house in Richmond. Mr. Whitmore saw the entries himself yesterday afternoon. Deacon Pike showed him. Deacon Pike thought he already knew. Not a sound in that yard." "Now I'd be very glad to be corrected," Evelyn said. "So I'll ask you straight, and every man here can hear your answer. Mr. Brooks, have you been taking money from Ansel Croft?" Samuel Brooks looked at Nathaniel Whitmore. 19 years. She could see the whole 19 years crossing between them in about a second and a half. The buried father, the boy taught to seat a horse the 1,000 mornings. "Nathaniel," Brooks said. And Nathaniel said quietly, "Answer her, Samuel." Brooks's mouth opened. Then it shut, and his shoulders came back, and something in the man just turned the way. A door turns when the hinge finally lets go. $240, he said. "You want to know what I run this place for? $400 a year in a house with a bad roof. 19 years. I brought in every harvest, and I buried your daddy, and I sat up 3 nights with you when you had the scarlatina, and your mama couldn't stand to look at you." His voice was rising now, and it was terrible because it was not entirely wrong. $400 a year. And you go to Richmond and spend $1,100 on horses. That doesn't— I know what it don't. Brooks jammed his hat down. "You want my keys?" "I want the 11 pages, Evelyn said. "Burned." "Then I'll take the keys." He threw them. They landed in the dirt at her feet, and nobody bent to pick them up. "You'll not make it to October," Brooks said. "Ma'am, I say that with no heat in it at all. There ain't a merchant between here and Lynchburg will front you. Seed, there ain't a bank will look at you, and come the first hard week, you'll find out what these men'll do for a woman when there's no man behind her." He looked around the yard. "Any of you boys want work Croft's hiring at the Eagle? 50 cents more a day." 6 men went with him. Evelyn made herself watch every one of them walk. She learned their names by heart. On the way out, Meacham was one, which she had expected, and young Prior Hale, which she had not, and Hale wouldn't look at her, and his mother had taken the quinine from her hand in June. When they were gone, there were 24 men left standing in that yard, and 30 seconds of the worst silence of her life. Reuel Tolliver spat in the dust. "Well," he said. "What's the work, ma'am?" Evelyn's chest went so tight she couldn't speak for a second. "The work," she said, "is a mile and a half of road. they cut it in 11 days. It should have taken 25. It took 11 because Evelyn Carter went out with them at 6 in the morning and stayed until 8 at night with a canvas hat and a tally book. And because on the third day she read the shares clause of the Buford contract out loud, at the noon rest, twice slow, and let every man there hear his own name in it. And Amos Tolliver, who could read a little, took the paper and looked at it a long time and said, "That's my daddy. Right there in a court paper. That's my daddy's name." It took 11 days, because on the 5th day, a wagon of white oak went down the new cut to Buford's mill and came back as boards and cash money, and Evelyn paid the shares out on the spot in the field in front of everyone before she paid herself a nickel. And it took 11 days, because on the 7th, Nathaniel Whitmore took his coat off and picked up an axe. Evelyn saw it happen and didn't say a word about it. Neither did anyone else. But at supper that night, Hattie put an extra piece of ham on his plate without being asked, and Evelyn saw him notice and saw him not know what to do with it. He came into the office at 10 with his hands wrecked. "You've got blisters on your blisters." "I'm aware." "There's a salve in the kitchen. Hattie'll—" "Evelyn." He sat down across the desk from her, which he had never done before. He had always stood. "Croft's still at the Eagle." "I know. He's been there 11 days. He hasn't gone home and he hasn't come here." "That's because he's waiting." "For what?" "For November," Evelyn said. "He doesn't need to buy Marrow Creek anymore. He tried that in June and I stopped it Saturday, and now he's got a better road to it, and if I were him, I'd sit at the Eagle drinking somebody else's whiskey and wait too." Nathaniel went white. "The note," he said. "The note. You think he'd—" "I think a man who buys 4 farms and a mill and a steward does not leave a 900-acre plantation's paper sitting in a country bank where anybody might pick it up." Evelyn folded her hands. "Nathaniel, I need you to ride to Lynchburg tomorrow and ask that bank one question. Not how much do I owe. Ask them who holds it." He was gone 2 days. She did not sleep well either night, and on the second afternoon, Clara Hayes came up the drive in a hired trap alone and sat in it in front of the house for a full minute before she got down. Hattie came to find her in the office. "Ma'am, you ain't going to believe who's in the yard." Evelyn met her on the porch. They looked at each other a good while. "I wasn't sure you'd let me stop," Clara said. "I'm not sure I have." "That's fair." Clara's chin was up, but her hands weren't steady. "I've come to tell you something, and then I'll go, and you'll not have to see me again." "Say it then." "My father owes $11,000. Clara said it fast, like a person going into cold water. "To Ansel Croft, since the spring of last year. And in April Mr. Croft came to our house and sat in our parlor and told my father that a debt is a heavy thing, but that friendships lighten it, and that he understood I had a long acquaintance with Mr. Whitmore of Amherst County." Evelyn didn't move. "He told you to come here," she said. "He asked me to visit," Clara said. "Which is the same thing in a nicer coat. And I came, and I stayed 6 weeks, and I let that man believe I might yet be had, and I let this whole county believe it too, because every hour Nathaniel Whitmore spent looking at me was an hour he spent not looking at his own accounts." Her mouth twisted. "You want to know the worst of it? He never once touched me. Not once. He was ashamed enough for that. He just liked being admired. That's all it ever was. He liked a woman in the room who thought he hung the moon, and I was very good at it because my father's house was on the line." "And the dress," Evelyn said. Clara flinched. "That was mine," she said. "Croft never told me to do that. I did that." She looked away. "He gave it to me and said it was moldering in a box, and I knew Evelyn the second I put my arms in the sleeves that it wasn't his to give. And I wore it down those stairs anyway, because you'd been kind to me at the June supper, and I could not stand it. I could not stand being pitied by the woman I was sent here to unmake." Evelyn was quiet. "Why tell me now?" "Because Croft came to the Eagle, and I went to see him about my father, and he had Samuel Brooks sitting at his table, and he told me laughing, Evelyn laughing, that I could stop working so hard, that it was already done, that he'd have the whole valley by Christmas, and Whitmore would sign it over himself and thank him for the mercy." Clara's eyes were bright and furious. And I have spent 4 months being a thing that man moved around a table, and I find I would rather be almost anything else." Evelyn came down one step. "Miss Hayes, would you say all of that to a judge?" Clara went pale. "It would ruin my father." "Yes. It would ruin me." "Yes," Evelyn said again. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and I'm not going to ask you today. But I want you to know that I'm going to ask you eventually, and I want you to have the time to hate me for it before I do." Clara laughed wetly. "God, he's got no idea what he married, has he?" "He's beginning to." Nathaniel got back at dusk. He came into the house without taking his hat off and walked straight past Hattie and put a folded paper down on the desk in front of his wife, and then stood there with his hands hanging. "They sold it in May," he said. 14 days after Croft's first letter to me. The Lynchburg Bank sold my note at a discount to a house in Richmond, and the house in Richmond assigned it the same week." He swallowed. "He's owned me since May, Evelyn. Before I ever drafted that bill of sale, He stopped. "Before you told me I'd married into this family because my land was valuable," Evelyn said. "Yes. Sit down before you fall down." He sat. $6,200, he said, to a man who does not want $6,200. "No. He'll not take it. He'll find a fault in the tender, or he'll be conveniently out of the county on the day, or He will." Evelyn agreed. "Which is why we are not going to pay Ansel Croft." Nathaniel looked up. "We're going to pay a court," she said. "The first week of October, we're going to walk into Amherst Courthouse with $6,200 in specie, and Judge Ammon's on the bench, and every merchant in this county in the gallery, and we are going to tender that money into the registry of the court in public with the Buford contract and the timber accounts and 19 tenants standing in the aisle. And then, it does not matter one particle where Mr. Croft is that day, or how sick he suddenly feels. The debt will be satisfied on the record." Nathaniel stared at her. "Can you do that?" "My father did it in 1806 to a man in Petersburg who thought he could squeeze him," Evelyn said. "I was 11. I sat on the bench and held his hat." He put his face in his hands. "Nathaniel, I have $30,000 of land," he said into his palms, "and a name that opens any door in this county, and a wife I bought like a tract of bottom land, and I could not have told you in May who held my own note." He looked up, and his eyes were wet, and he did not bother to hide it, which she had not thought him capable of. "Everything I have ever had, I was given. My father gave me the ground, and Brooks gave me the harvests, and you gave me the answer, and I have never in my whole life earned one single thing standing on my own 2 feet." Evelyn let that sit. "You cut road for 4 days, she said. "That's not— 24 men watched you do it, and not one of them expected you to last an hour." She closed the ledger. "It's a beginning. It is a very small beginning, and it does not buy you one thing from me, and I want you to understand that plainly. But it's a beginning, and I've seen men start from worse." He nodded slowly. "How much have we got?" he said. "Truly. With the timber, the July hay, and what the wheat should make 4,800. Maybe 5 even if the price holds. That's 1,200 short. 13. In 10 weeks. In 10 weeks, Evelyn said, with the corn coming and the bottomland wheat still standing at Marrow Creek, which is 40 acres of the best ground in this county and worth $1,100 on the stock right now. Nathaniel took a long breath. Then everything he said, everything we have is sitting in a floodplain. Yes. In August. Yes, Evelyn said. And neither one of them said the other thing because there was no need to say it out loud, and because saying a thing out loud in August in Virginia has always felt to farming people uncomfortably close to asking for it. Nathaniel stood. He picked up her lamp and carried it to the door for her, which no one had ever done in that house, and he stopped there with his hand on the latch. Evelyn. When Brooks said it about the first hard week, about what men will do for a woman with no man behind her, he didn't turn around. I want you to know I'm behind you. Evelyn Carter took the lamp out of his hand. No, Nathaniel, she said not unkindly. You're beside me. That's different, and it's better, and it's a great deal harder, and I would very much like to see whether you can hold it." It did not rain for 19 days. That was the first thing anybody would remember about that August, and it was the thing that fooled them all. The corn curled. The creek dropped until Amos Tolliver could walk across Marrow Creek at the ford without wetting his knees, and he did it twice a day just to have something to tell people. The wheat in the bottomland went from green to gold to a hard bright color that meant 10 days, maybe 12, and then the harvest, and then $1,100. Evelyn Carter walked that 40 acres every single morning of those 19 days. "You'll wear a path," Hattie said. "I already have." "Ma'am, it ain't going to ripen faster for being looked at." "No," Evelyn said, "but I'll know the day it's ready, and I'd rather know it myself than be told." On the 20th day, Ezra Buford's granddaughter came up the drive on a mule at a dead run. Evelyn was in the yard before the girl got off it. "Grandpa says come." The child was 9 years old and out of breath and scared. "He says come now, and he says bring Mr. Whitmore, and he says tell you it's about the Beckwith race." "The what?" "That's what he said. The Beckwith race. He said you'd know." Evelyn didn't know, but Nathaniel, coming out of the barn with a bridle over his shoulder, stopped like he'd walked into a wall. "The old Beckwith mill race," he said. 4 miles up. It's been dead 30 years. "Dead how?" "There was a mill up there when my father was a boy. It burned. The race silted in." He was already turning for a horse. "There's a stone head gate at the top of it. Nobody's touched it since before I was born." "Nathaniel." I know, he said. "I know, Evelyn. Get your hat." Ezra Buford was standing in the road a half-mile above his own mill with his hands on his hips, and he did not say good morning. "You see that?" he said. "See what?" "That." He pointed at the creek. "Look at the water, ma'am." Evelyn looked. It took her a moment. "It's up," she said. 4 inches since Tuesday, in the worst dry spell I've seen since 1808. The old man's mouth was a hard line. "Nothing's rained. Nothing's rained in 3 weeks between here and the Blue Ridge, and my creek has come up 4 inches, and I have run water for 51 years, and I am telling you both, plain water, don't do that." Nathaniel said, "Somebody's holding it. Somebody's holding it and letting a little slip, which is what you do," Buford said, "when you're filling a pond and you don't want the fellows downstream to notice they've gone dry." "Filling it for what?" Buford turned and looked at Evelyn. "You tell him, honey," he said. "You already know." Evelyn's hands had gone cold in the middle of an August morning. "To have it," she said. "To have it, and hold it, and let it go when he chooses." They rode the 4 miles. They found 11 men working at the head of the old Beckwith race, with fresh timber and new stone and a pond behind a raised gate that ran back into the hollow farther than Evelyn could see, and a foreman who came down to the road wiping his hands and touched his hat as polite as a deacon. "Morning. Help you folks." "Whose work is this?" Nathaniel said. "Mr. Croft's, sir." "On whose land?" "Mr. Croft's land, sir. Bought it off the Beckwith heirs in March." The foreman smiled. "Everything's in order. You're welcome to look at the paper if you doubt it." "That gate," Evelyn said, "is holding 4 miles of water above 19 families." "That gate's holding a mill pond, ma'am." "There's no mill." "There's going to be," the foreman said, and his smile did not move one particle. "Mr. Croft's a great believer in improvement." Nathaniel put his horse forward a step. "And if it lets go?" "Then I reckon it lets go, sir," the man said. "Acts of God ain't in my contract." They rode back at a hard trot, and neither of them spoke until the Whitmore gate, and then Nathaniel said in a voice she had never heard out of him, "I'll burn it." "You will not." "Evelyn, you will not, because that's a criminal trespass on a lawful improvement, and by supper, you'd be in the Amherst jail, and by Friday, he'd have this place at auction, with nobody standing between him and it. But a 24-year-old woman he could tie up in court until Judgment Day." She swung down. "That is exactly what he wants you to do. That is why the foreman was polite." Nathaniel sat his horse with his jaw working. "Then what?" "Then we get the wheat off that bottom before it comes down. You said 10 days. "I did." How long have we got? I don't know, Evelyn said. That's the honest answer and I hate it. It depends on whether he means to open it or whether he means to let the weather do it for him. And I'd guess the second, because a man who buys a steward buys deniability too. She sent for the men at 4 o'clock that afternoon. 24 of them stood in the yard, and she told them the truth. All of it, the pond and the gate and the $1,100 standing in the bottomland. And when she was done, Reuel Tolliver said what everyone was thinking. Ma'am, it ain't ripe. No. You cut green wheat, you get half. You get $600 instead of 11, Evelyn said. I've done the figure 4 times, and 600 in the barn is worth more than 1,100 in a river. A hired man named Silas Orr said, and if it don't flood, then I've cost this place $500, and every one of you will have the right to say I lost my nerve. She looked at them steady. I've thought about that. I'd rather be laughed at than drowned out. Amos Tolliver said, how long to cut 40 acres? With 24 men and every cradle scythe in this county 4 days, maybe 5. Then let's quit talking about it, Amos said. They started at first light, and they were 3 days into it when the sky changed. It came in from the west on the afternoon of the 3rd day, and every man in that field stopped and straightened up. At the same moment the way farming people do, and looked at it, and nobody said one word. Reuel Tolliver took his hat off and wiped his head and put it back on. Well, he said. How long? Evelyn said. That's a night storm, ma'am. 10 o'clock. Maybe midnight. How much is left standing? 9 acres. 9. 9 and a piece. Evelyn looked at the sky, and then at the 9 acres, and then at the men who had been swinging cradles for 3 days in August heat, and whose hands she had seen, and whose wives had been carrying water out to them since Tuesday. Cut till dark, she said. Then everybody goes home to their own houses. Nobody sleeps in the bottom tonight. We could work by lantern. Reuel. She said it quiet. Go home and get your family up on high ground. He looked at her a long moment. Yes, ma'am, he said. The rain started at 9. By 10 it was coming so hard that Hattie had to shout across the kitchen, and Evelyn had the 19 names spread on the table in front of her, with a stub of pencil working down the list, and Nathaniel was standing over her shoulder with his coat already on. The reeds are lowest, she said. Then the piles. Then the Cobb place, but Cobb's got that rise behind the barn, so they can get up if they've got the sense to. How do you know all this? Because I walked it in May, and I wrote it down. She didn't look up. The pile house is the bad one. It sits 11 feet off the water, and there's a woman in it who's 7 months gone, and a man with 1 leg. 11 feet's plenty. 11 feet is plenty for a rain, Evelyn said. It is nothing at all for a pond 4 miles long coming down a hollow at once. Nathaniel went to the door and opened it and stood there while the rain came in over the sill and soaked the floor, and Hattie didn't even fuss at him. Get the horses, he said. Nathaniel, you're going to tell me to stay here. I was going to tell you, Evelyn said, that I need you to take the 6 men in the barn and go to the piles and get them out, and I'll take the rest and go down the creek from the reeds up, and we'll meet at the ford. She stood and took her father's oilcloth coat off the peg. I wasn't going to tell you to stay anywhere. He looked at her. All right, he said. Nathaniel. Yes. Don't be a hero tonight. I don't need a hero. I need a man who can count heads and remember names. They got the reeds out at 11 and the cobs at 1:30. The water was up over the ford by then, and coming so fast it made a sound like a crowd, and Evelyn had 8 men and 4 horses and a farm wagon, and she put children in the wagon, 3 deep with their mothers holding them, and she walked beside it herself with her hand on the wheel because the mules would not go otherwise. At the Sims place, the door was barred and nobody answered. They're gone up already, Silas Orr shouted. Ma'am, they're gone. Their wagon's in the shed. What? Their wagon is in the shed. Silas, if they'd gone, they'd have taken it. And she was already at the door, hammering on it with the flat of her hand. It opened 4 inches, an old woman's face. Mrs. Sims, the creek's coming. I ain't leaving. Ma'am, there's a pond 4 miles long. I was born in this house. The old woman's chin came up, and it was the most familiar thing Evelyn had seen all night. It was her own chin. It was every stubborn woman in Virginia. My husband died in that room, and I ain't leaving him. Evelyn stood in the rain and made a decision in about a second and a half. Then I'll stay with you, she said. You'll do what? I'll stay. Silas, take the wagon onto the Tollivers and don't wait. Ma'am, I ain't. Go. Mrs. Sims stared at her. You'd stay in this house. I would. For what? Because I'm not going to stand in a road and let a woman drown to teach her a lesson, Evelyn said. And because I have got 19 families tonight, and I have not lost one of them yet, and I do not intend to start with you. The old woman's face did something complicated. Let me get my Bible, she said. They lost the Pyle house at midnight. Nathaniel got there with 6 men and found the water already in the yard, and the one-legged man, Jubal Pyle, trying to get his wife out a window because the door wouldn't open against the current, and it took 4 men to hold the horses and 2 to get her through, and Nathaniel Whitmore, who had never in his life carried anything heavier than a saddle, carried a woman 7 months pregnant, 300 yards through water up to his chest, with her arms locked around his neck and her husband hopping and falling and hauling himself along behind. Hollering that he was fine. Don't you turn around for me. He set her down on this high ground and went back for Jubal Pyle himself. Then he stood up in the dark with the water tearing at him, and he counted out loud like Evelyn had told him. Jubal, Mrs. Pyle, that's 2. He turned. Where's the boy? Nobody answered. There was a boy, Nathaniel shouted. Pyle, where's your son? And Jubal Pyle, on his hands and knees in the mud, screamed a word that wasn't a word. The boy was 8, and his name was Tom, and he had gone back for a dog. They found him in a China berry tree 40 yards downstream at 20 minutes past midnight, and the man who found him was Samuel Brooks. Nathaniel came up on him from behind, and did not for one full second believe what he was looking at. Brooks in the water to his armpits with one arm hooked around that tree, and the boy on his shoulder like a sack of meal. Take him, Brooks said. Samuel. Take him, Nathaniel. He took him. He handed the boy up to Silas Orr's brother, and turned back around, and Brooks was still in the water, and it took a moment to understand why, and the reason was that the man's left arm was bent the wrong way between the wrist and the elbow, and had been for a while. Give me your hand. Which one? Brooks said and laughed, and it was the worst sound Nathaniel had ever heard. They got him out. They laid him on the bank, and he was gray as ash, and he grabbed Nathaniel's collar with his good hand and pulled him down close and said, You listen to me. Samuel, we'll talk when. You listen. Brooks's teeth were chattering so hard, the words came in pieces. I opened it. Nathaniel went completely still. Say that again. The gate, 9 o'clock tonight, 2 turns. Brooks's eyes were wide open and fixed on nothing. He told me 2 turns, and it'd take the bottom land and nothing else. He said it'd wash the wheat and scare the tenants in Virginia would call rain a crime. His grip tightened. Nathaniel, it wasn't 2 turns. The whole face went. That gate's 30-year-old, and it went, and there's 4 miles of water in that hollow, and I have killed every soul on this creek. You haven't. I seen a house go by. Whose? I don't know. And Samuel, 45 years old, who had buried Nathaniel's father and taught him to seat a horse, started to cry like a child. There was a lamp in it. There was a lamp still burning in the window, Nathaniel, and it went by me in the dark. Nathaniel stood up. He stood there in the rain for about 3 seconds, and every one of them cost him something. Then he said, Get him on a horse. Tie him if you have to. Then every man that can still stand comes with me. Where? Silas Orr's brother said. Downstream, Nathaniel said. My wife's downstream. The Sims house went at 1 o'clock. It did not float away, which was the mercy of it. The water came up under the floor and lifted the whole east side 8 inches and set it down again. Crooked, and the front wall opened up like a book. And by then, Evelyn had Mrs. Sims up in the loft with her Bible and her dead husband's coat, and the 2 of them were sitting in 6 inches of water on a bed that was floating an inch off the joists. How high does it come? Mrs. Sims said. She was very calm now. That was the thing about old women. They got calm right when everybody else quit being. I don't know. Guess. I'd rather not. Girl, I'm 81 years old. I ain't going to faint. Then it comes higher, Evelyn said. It's still rising, and it's rising faster than it was an hour ago. Mrs. Sims nodded slowly. That's a pond let go, she said. Ain't it? Yes, ma'am. Croft. Evelyn's head came around. How do you know that name? Because a fellow come to this house in April and offered me $200 for 60 acres, and when I said no, he told me the country was changing, and I ought to think on my age. The old woman spat neatly into the water. I told him my age was the one thing in this world I'd earned honest. They heard the men at 1:20. Evelyn got the shutter open and screamed until her voice tore, and the answer came back over the water in a voice she knew, and Mrs. Sims said, Well, that's your husband. And Evelyn said, That's my husband, and found that her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold the shutter. He came in through the gable end with a rope around his waist and 3 men on the other end of it. Are you hurt? No. Are you hurt, Evelyn? I am not hurt. Take her first. Evelyn. Nathaniel Whitmore, she is 81 years old, and I am 24, take her first. He took her first, and when he came back through that gable for the second time. Evelyn Carter looked at him, soaked through bleeding from the scalp, a man who 12 weeks ago had told her she was a business arrangement, and she said the only thing there was to say. You came. Of course I came. You had 160 acres of standing timber 4 miles the other direction and no water in it. Evelyn. I'm just saying it out loud, she said, so that I'll remember it right later. They lost no one. That was the number that ran through Amherst County for the next 30 years, and it started that night at the Tolliver place, where they counted heads in a barn by lantern light at 3 o'clock in the morning, every family, every child, every hired man, and came up whole, except they didn't at first. At the first count, they were short 4. Evelyn heard the silence change and knew it before anybody said anything, and she was up off the milking stool and into the middle of the barn saying, Who's missing? Say the names. The Hales, Ruel Tolliver said. Widow Hale and the 2 little ones. The Hales are on the ridge. They're 100 feet up. Pryor moved his mama down to the creek in July, ma'am. Tolliver's voice was flat. When he took the work at Croft's. There's a house down there Croft give him for it. The whole barn heard it. Evelyn saw 20 faces turn. Pryor Hale, 19 years old, who had walked out of that yard behind Samuel Brooks with 6 other men, and would not meet her eye when he went, and whose mother had taken quinine from Evelyn's own hand in June, and cried and called her a blessing. Where's the house? Evelyn said. Ma'am, you ain't going back out in that. Where is the house, Ruel? Below the ford. Below. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn turned for the door, and Nathaniel got there first and put himself in it. No. Get out of my way. Evelyn, that water is 9 feet over that ford and moving like a mill wheel, and there is not one thing you can do down there but drown. There are 2 children. I know there are 2 children. It came out of him in a roar, and the whole barn flinched, and he took a breath and got his voice back down. I know. I know exactly how many there are, and I know their names because you made me learn them. And I am telling you as a man who has been in that water twice tonight, that if you go down there, you will not come back. And if you do not come back, then Croft has this valley by Christmas, and every soul in this barn is off this land by spring, and you know that's true, and I am asking you. His voice cracked wide open. I am asking you, Evelyn, not to go. Nobody in that barn moved. Evelyn Carter stood there with her hand on the doorframe and made the hardest decision of her life, and it took her 4 seconds, and she was never entirely sure afterward whether she had made it right. All right, she said. Then a voice from the dark outside said, Ma'am. Pryor Hale came into the lantern light carrying his baby sister on his hip and his brother by the hand with his mother hanging off his shoulder, half conscious, and he got about 3 steps into that barn and his legs went out from under him. Evelyn caught his head before it hit the floor. I'm sorry, he was saying. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Hush. I took his money. Pryor. He give us a house and I took it, and I knew what he was. I knew, and Mama said don't, and I said what's she ever done for us, but bring a bottle of quinine and think she's God. He was sobbing so hard he could barely get it out. I said that about you, in a public road, and you come out here tonight for us anyway. I didn't, Evelyn said. He stopped. I didn't come, she said. I was going to. I was standing at that door 20 seconds ago and my husband stopped me, and I let him stop me. And I want you to know that prior, because I am not going to stand here and be thanked for a thing I did not do. The boy stared up at her. You was going to come? Yes. For us? Yes. Prior Hale put his face in his hands. Widow Hale needs blankets and hot water, Evelyn said, standing, and her voice was perfectly steady, which was a thing she had learned from her father and had never been more grateful for. Hattie, Amos, get the little ones' wet things off them. Rule, count again. They counted again. 19 families. 61 souls. Not one gone. The rain quit at dawn. Evelyn walked down to the bottomland at 6 o'clock in the morning, with Nathaniel a half step behind her, and Ruel Tolliver, and Amos, and about 11 other men strung out behind them, and nobody said a word the whole way. And when they got to the top of the rise where you could see the whole 40 acres, they stopped. 9 acres of standing wheat. Gone. Not flattened, gone, scoured off the ground down to the mud, and the mud itself cut into channels, and the fence. Her father had set in 1804, lying in a windrow against a stand of sycamores 400 yards downstream with a dead heifer in it. Amos Tolliver said, "Oh Lord." Evelyn didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "The barn." "Ma'am." "The barn, Amos. The 31 acres we did cut. Is it in the barn?" "Yes'm, it's in the barn." "Is the barn dry?" Ruel Tolliver had already turned around and was walking, then trotting, and by the time he got to the rise above the home place, he was running, and the men ran after him. And Evelyn Carter stood in the ruin of her father's bottomland and waited to find out whether she had anything left in the world at all. Tolliver came back at a run with his hat in his hand. "Dry," he said. "Dry as a bone, ma'am. Water come in the low corner about 4 inches, and we lost maybe 30 bushels, and the rest of it setting up there on the boards just as pretty as you please." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Say the number," she said. "Ma'am. You've been threshing wheat since you were 9 years old, Ruel Tolliver. Say the number." Tolliver did the arithmetic in his head, the way farming men do, lips moving. 620, he said. 640 if the price holds. Evelyn opened her eyes. "Then we're not dead," she said. "Ma'am, you're 4,000 short of—" "We're not dead, Ruel. Those are 2 different things, and I'll thank you to know the difference." Nathaniel found her an hour later, sitting on the bank of what had been the Marrow Creek Ford, with her boots in the mud and her father's oilcloth coat across her knees. He sat down beside her without asking. "Say it," he said. "Say what?" "Whatever it is you've been sitting here saying to yourself for an hour." Evelyn was quiet a moment. "He drowned my father's field," she said. "I stood on that rise, and I looked at 412 acres of the best bottomland in Virginia, and there was a dead cow in my father's fence, and I thought, good. Because it's mine now. Because the deed says Evelyn Carter, and it does not say Whitmore, and it does not say Croft, and that man can wash every seed off it he likes, and it will still be mine when the water goes down." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "And then I thought about the Sims house, and I felt sick with myself for thinking it." "Evelyn." "I know." Evelyn, look at me. He waited until she did. 61 people slept in a barn last night, and every one of them woke up. Do you understand what that is? Do you understand that there is not a man, woman, or child in this county who is going to talk about anything else for the rest of their natural lives? It doesn't pay the note. No. The first week of October. Evelyn said, "I'm going to walk into that courthouse and tender $6,200 into the registry. And right this minute, I have got about 1,911 weeks. Then we'll find it." "From where, Nathaniel?" She turned on him. Not angry, just emptied out. "The timber's cut and sold. The wheat's half gone. The corn won't make till October, and the price is a rumor. There is no more ground to squeeze. I have squeezed every acre on this place until it squeaked, and I am short." Nathaniel Whitmore looked out at the water for a while. "There's the horses," he said. Evelyn's head came up. "There's 11 head in that barn," he said, "and 4 of them are the best blood in this part of Virginia, and I paid $1,100 for 2 of them in Richmond in April, which you have been too polite to throw in my face for 11 weeks. There's the carriage. There's my father's watch and my mother's silver, and about $900 of furniture in a house that neither of us sits in." He said it evenly, like a man reading a list. "I make it $2,200-$2,300 if I sell it fast and take a beating on it, which I will." Evelyn stared at him. "Nathaniel, don't," he said. "Please don't be gentle about it. I can't stand it if you're gentle about it. That's your father's watch." "It is. You've worn it every day since I've known you." "I have." He was looking at the water. "And my father bought this land off a man who has ruined Evelyn, and I have known that since I was 14, and I have never once let myself think about it. And last night, I carried a pregnant woman 300 yards through a river because another man decided that ruining people was a legitimate way to acquire ground." His jaw worked. "I would very much like to not be that. Just once. Just this once, while there's still something to give up." Evelyn didn't trust herself to speak. So she reached over and took his hand, which she had not done in the whole of their marriage, and neither one of them said anything about it. They were still sitting there when Amos Tolliver came down the bank at a run for the second time that morning. Ma'am, you got to come up to the house." "What's happened?" "They're in the yard." "Who is?" "Everybody," Amos said. There were 61 people in the Whitmore yard, 19 tenant families with their children, and 11 hired men, and Ezra Buford, who had ridden 4 miles on a bad hip, and Jubal Pyle, sitting on a stump with his crutch across his knees, and Mrs. Sims in a borrowed dress with her Bible, and Hattie Doyle standing on the kitchen step, with her arms folded like a sentry. Ruel Tolliver stepped out front of them, with his hat in his hands. "Ma'am." "Ruel, we had a talk." He cleared his throat. He was not a man built for speeches, and it showed in every line of him. "Down at the barn, about the shares." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "If it's about the timber money, nobody is giving back 1 cent of—" "Now you hush a minute," Tolliver said, "'cause I ain't but going to get through this once." She hushed. "That road money," he said. "There's $180-some of it in 19 houses, and it's the first money in a court paper any of us ever had our names on." He turned his hat over. "Mary put ours in a coffee tin, and she has counted it about 400 times. My boy learned to read his own name off that contract." "Ruel." "We're keeping it," Tolliver said. Evelyn blinked. "We're keeping it," he repeated, "because you'd want us to, and because a man that gives back the first thing he ever earned is a fool. But—" He looked up. "We got a proposition, and Buford's in it, and it come from him, so I'll let him say it." Ezra Buford limped forward. "Corn's not in," he said. "Won't be till October. And there's 160 acres of white oak on that north line, and we cut maybe 19 of it. There's no time, Mr. Buford. Timber wants seasoning. It wants. Green oak makes a fine cross-tie and a finer sill, and there's 4 towns between here and Lynchburg that got a foot of water in 'em last night." The old man's eyes were sharp as tacks. "Everybody on this creek is going to be building by Monday, ma'am, and there is exactly 1 mill still standing between the ridge and the river, and it is mine, and it wants timber, and you have got 140 acres of it and a road." Evelyn stood absolutely still. "How much?" she said. "Cut hard for 10 weeks, 24 men, and my 2 boys run it night and day." Buford 2,800, maybe 3,000. 3,000, Evelyn said, "give or take. And the tenant's shares off the top." "Off the top," Buford agreed. "Wrote in, same as before." Evelyn turned around slowly and looked at the yard. 61 people looked back at her. "You understand what you're offering," she said, and her voice was not steady now, not at all. 10 weeks, every daylight hour and half the dark ones, through the corn harvest, after a night like the one you just had. "Yes'm," somebody said. "Some of you have got no house to go back to tonight." Then we'll build 'em out of your oak, Jubal Pyle said from his stump, and pay you when we can. And if you say no to that, ma'am, I'll get up off this thing and argue with you. Somebody laughed. Then a couple more. Evelyn Carter put her hand over her mouth and stood there in front of all of them and could not say one word for a good 10 seconds. All right, she finally said. All right, Monday morning, 6 o'clock at the North Line. 6 o'clock, Rule Tolliver said. And Rule, ma'am. Thank you, Evelyn said. And I'm going to say it once and then never again, because if I say it twice, I'll come apart, and I have not got the time. She got as far as the kitchen door before Nathaniel caught her arm. There's one more thing, he said. And I'd rather tell you now than have you find it out from somebody else. Nathaniel, I have had about all the... Brooks is in the back bedroom, he said. With a broken arm and a fever. He's been there since 4 o'clock this morning. Evelyn's whole body went rigid. He opened the gate, Nathaniel said. 9 o'clock last night. 2 turns on Croft's instruction, and the face gave way and took the whole hollow with it. He told me himself in the water, and he'll tell it to anybody who asks, and he has been saying it out loud all morning to Hattie, whether she wants to hear it or not. Evelyn didn't move. He pulled Tom Pyle out of a chinaberry tree with a broken arm, Nathaniel said quietly. 8 years old. He'd have gone otherwise. Do you want me to forgive him? No, Nathaniel said. God, no. I don't forgive him, and I've known him since I was 13. He let go of her arm. But he is the only living man who can put Ansel Croft's name on that gate, Evelyn, and he wants to do it, and he wants to do it in front of a judge, and I thought you had better hear that from me before you decided what you were going to do with him. Evelyn stood in that doorway a long moment. Then she pushed past him and went down the hall and opened the door of the back bedroom, and Samuel Brooks turned his head on the pillow and looked at her, and neither one of them said anything for a while. Ma'am, he said at last. Mr. Brooks. I ain't going to ask you for nothing. Good, Evelyn said, because you'd not get it. He nodded once and shut his eyes, and a tear ran sideways down into his ear, and he did not wipe it away because he only had the one hand, and he was using it to hold onto the bed frame. I opened it, he said. I know. I'd like to say it to the judge. Evelyn Carter stood at the foot of that bed for a long, long time. Then you'll get well enough to sit up in a courtroom, she said. And in the meantime, you will eat what Hattie brings you, and you will say thank you. And Mr. Brooks, when you can hold a pen again, you will write down every quarterly payment, every date, and every word that man ever said to you, and you will sign it. Brooks opened his eyes. That's it, he said. That's all you want off me. That's all I want off you, Evelyn said. The rest of it is between you and the 8-year-old boy, and I would not take that off your hands for the world. They started at the North Line at 6 o'clock Monday morning, and at 6:10, 6 more men came up the road. Coy Meacham was in front. He had his hat in his hands before he was within 20 feet. Ma'am. 24 men stopped working. Every one of them. Mr. Meacham? We come to ask for work. Croft's paying 50 cents more a day. Croft ain't paying nothing, Meacham said. Ain't been a wage out of that camp since Thursday, and there won't be, and I'd rather tell you that straight than have you hear it and think I come back because I found religion. Evelyn looked at the 6 of them a long moment. Rule, she said. You've been cutting since dawn. You want them, Tolliver spat. I want the work done. That's not what I asked. No, ma'am, it ain't. Tolliver came over slow. Coy, you stood in that yard and let Brooks say a thing about her, and you never opened your mouth. I know it. My boy stayed. I know that too. Tolliver turned to Evelyn. Take 'em. Half shares till the 1st of October full after, and they don't get a vote on nothing till the 10th. That's hard. It's fair, Meacham said quickly. Ma'am, it's fair. I'll take it. Then take an axe, Evelyn said. And Mr. Meacham, if you leave this line again for any wage on God's earth, don't come back up this road. Not for work, not for water, not to explain yourself. I'll not have my men wondering every morning who's still here. Yes, ma'am. They cut White Oak for 6 days and hauled it down the new road to Buford's mill, and the mill ran until 9 at night, and on the 7th morning, a man in a good coat was standing in the middle of the road with a paper in his hand and 2 hired men behind him. Mrs. Whitmore. Carter, Evelyn said. What's that? An injunction out of the county court. The road you cut crosses 11 rods of the old Beckwith tract at the second bend, which is the property of Mr. Ansel Croft, and you are enjoined from further hauling upon it pending a hearing. The wagon behind her had 4,000 board feet on it. 11 rods, Evelyn said. 11 rods, ma'am. Out of a mile and a half. That's the law, ma'am. It don't measure fairness, it measures ground. Amos Tolliver said, we could go around. There's no around. It's a hollow. Evelyn was already doing arithmetic behind her eyes and not liking any of it. When's the hearing? 3 weeks. 3? She stopped herself. She did not give the man the satisfaction of finishing it. 3 weeks was the difference between $3,000 and nothing at all. And every soul standing in that road knew it, and the man in the good coat knew it best of all, which was why he was smiling in the polite way that Croft's people always smiled. Mr. Whitmore's at the house, he asked. He's on the far end of that wagon with a peavy in his hands, Evelyn said. You're welcome to go tell him. The man declined. Evelyn stood in that road for about 90 seconds and did not say one word, and 29 men waited on her, and then she said, Amos, ride to the Sims place and ask Mrs. Sims if I may call on her at noon. Ma'am, her house is broke in half. She's in the loft of it with her Bible, and I expect she's furious about something, and I intend to be there when she is. Mrs. Sims was sitting on a chair in what had been her front room, with the wall opened up behind her like a book and a borrowed shawl around her shoulders, and she listened to the whole thing without moving. 11 rods, she said. Yes, ma'am. And if you come across my 60, where do you come out? A quarter mile above Buford's on the county road, and it's a longer pull and it's steeper, and it'll cost me 2 hours a day. Evelyn set her hands in her lap. Mrs. Sims, I'm not going to dress this up. I need a cart way across your land for 10 weeks, and I have got no money to pay for it, and every wagon that crosses will cut ruts you'll be looking at for 5 years. The old woman regarded her. That fellow offered me $200 in April, she said. I know it. And you're offering me ruts. I'm offering you ruts, Evelyn agreed. Mrs. Sims laughed one dry crack of a laugh and put her hand out. Girl, I sat in a loft with you at 1 o'clock in the morning, waiting to find out if I was going to die, she said. Cut your road, cut it Tuesday. And when your lawyer writes it down, write it that it's a grant, not a sale, and put my name on it in full. Perlina Sims, and I'll thank you to spell it right, because there ain't been a paper in this county with my whole name on it since my husband died. They cut it in 2 days. They lost 11 wagon loads to the delay and gained back 4 by running the mill until 11 at night, and Ezra Buford's 2 boys slept in the mill house on grain sacks and did not go home for a month. And on the last day of August, the buyers stopped coming. Evelyn found out from Buford, who rode up at supper time with his hat still on. Amherst Courthouse ain't taking my sills. They ordered 40. And this morning the man told me they'd found another supply. Buford's face was gray. Same story at New Glasgow, same at the Forks. Cheaper. Free, Buford said. Near enough. There's a fellow selling green oak at $1 under my cost, and he don't seem to mind about it. Nathaniel put his fork down. He'll bleed himself dry. He'll bleed himself dry for 10 weeks and then own the country, Evelyn said. It's not a loss to him, it's a payment. He's just not calling it that. Nobody ate anything for a minute. Then we're finished, Buford said. No. Ma'am, I have run timber for 51 years, and when a man undersells you at a loss and you can't outlast him, he's selling to towns, Evelyn said. To county commissioners and building committees and men who buy by the invoice. Mr. Buford, how many houses came off their blocks between here and the river on the night of the 18th? Buford opened his mouth. Shut it. 100, he said. 120. And how many of those families are buying by the invoice? None of them. They're buying 8 boards at a time out of a coffee tin. Then we'll sell them 8 boards at a time, Evelyn said. 1 family at a time. Every day all fall. $2 down and the rest at Christmas if they haven't got it, and I'll write every one of them in a book with their name on it. Credit, Buford said flatly. To people that just lost everything. Yes. That's the worst business I ever heard in my life. It is, Evelyn agreed. It's also the only market in this county that Ansel Croft can't buy because he'd have to look 61 families in the face to do it. And he cannot, and he never will. She went out herself. Every day for 5 weeks. Nathaniel drove the wagon, and Evelyn kept the book, and they went house to house up both sides of that creek and into 4 towns, and she did not once open with the price. She opened with, "How many did you lose?" Nobody had lost anybody. That was the thing. That was the whole thing. 61 souls in a barn, and every one of them woke up, and by the second week of September, there was not a settlement between the ridge and the river where somebody did not say some version of it out loud when the wagon came into the yard. That's the Whitmore woman. The one that stayed in the Sims house. Some of them paid cash. Most paid $2. One man paid in guinea fowl, and Evelyn wrote it in the book at 11 cents a head and did not crack a smile. At the end of the 5th week, she counted it at the desk with Nathaniel standing behind her. 1940, she said. Cash in hand. Another 1100 owed on the book, which is not money, so I won't count it as money. With the wheat, 2,560, and the note is 6,200. It is. Nathaniel went out of the room and came back in 20 minutes with a wooden box and set it on the desk. What's that? My mother's silver, 22 pieces. He opened it. The Richmond man will give 300 and it's worth 5. He knows I need it, so it'll be 3. Nathaniel, the horses go Thursday at the Lynchburg sale. He said it in a level voice, the voice of a man reading somebody else's letter. 11 head. I make it 800 if the buyers are honest, and 6 if Croft's people show up, and Croft's people will show up. You paid 1,100 for 2 of them in April. I did. You told me they were the best blood in Virginia. They are. Something moved in his throat. Say it, Evelyn. Say what? Say the thing you've had in your mouth since June. That I bought 2 horses for the price of 11 families' back wages, while the roof of the steward's house leaked, and the Tollivers were buying their own flour back at a markup. Say it. I would rather you said it than went on not saying it. Evelyn closed the ledger. No, she said. Why not? Because you just said it yourself, and better than I would have, and there is no earthly use in me repeating a thing a man has already found out. She looked up at him. I'm not going to punish you, Nathaniel. I haven't got the time and I don't think it works. If you want punishment, you'll have to find it somewhere else. He stood there holding the box. That's worse, he said. I know it is. The horses went Thursday and made $580, and Croft's man bought the bay stallion for $240 in front of half of Amfort County, and Nathaniel Whitmore stood at the rail with his hands on the top board and never changed his face once. Reuel Tolliver stood beside him the whole time and afterward said only, "That was well done," and Nathaniel said, "Was it?" And Tolliver said, "Any fool can lose a thing. Losing it standing up is a different piece of work." He sold the watch in Amherst Courthouse on the 29th of September. Evelyn didn't know until she saw his wrist go to his waistcoat pocket at supper, the way it had 100 times, and find nothing there. She put her spoon down. How much? $91. Nathaniel, it's a watch, he said. It kept time. It's keeping time for somebody else now, and it doesn't know the difference. He went on eating. I've been reaching for it about 40 times a day, and I expect I will for a year. That's all right. It'll remind me. Of what? Of the day I found out what things are for. That left them $340 short, with 6 days to go. And Evelyn worked the figures 4 separate ways at that desk, and there was no 5th way. And at 11 o'clock on the night of the 30th, she put her head down on the ledger and stayed like that for about a minute and a half. Then she sat up because there was a knock at the front door. It was Perlina Sims, 81 years old, at 11 o'clock at night in a hired trap driven by her grandson. I hear you're short, she said. Ma'am, who told you? Girl, I have lived in this county since Washington was alive. Everybody tells me everything. It's the only pleasure I've got left." She held out a canvas poke with both hands, and it was heavy. $412, which is a funny number, and I didn't choose it, that's just what's in there. Evelyn did not take it. "Mrs. Sims, it's been under the hearthstone since 1798. My husband put it there, and I have not touched it in 17 years because I had no use I thought was worth it." The old woman shook the bag once impatient. "Take it." "I can't." "Why can't you?" "Because you might not get it back," Evelyn said. "That is the plain truth, and you'll hear it from me before you hear it from anybody. If the judge rules against me next week, that money is gone, and you are 81 years old and living in half a house." Mrs. Sims looked at her for a while. "When that wall come open," she said, "and the water was up on the bed, and I was sitting there getting ready to meet my maker, do you know what I thought about?" "No, ma'am. I thought, well, ain't this something? 81 years, and the last face I'm going to see belongs to a girl I never met who could have rode on by." She pushed the bag into Evelyn's hands. "You didn't ask me if I was worth the trouble, so don't you stand in that door and ask me if you are. Write it down proper. At interest. 6%, and file it at the courthouse with my whole name spelled right, and if it goes bad, it goes bad, and I'll have had the finest week of my old age." Evelyn Carter took the bag and could not say anything at all. "Now don't you cry on me," Mrs. Sims said. "I can't abide it. Good night." The bill in Chancery arrived the next morning. Judge Ammons brought it himself, which told Evelyn everything about how bad it was before she had read a line. "He's not fighting the tender," Ammons said, standing in the office with his hat under his arm. "He's smarter than that. He'll take your $6,200 and thank you for it. Then what? He's moving to set aside the deed of trust on Marrow Creek. Says it was a fraudulent conveyance made in prejudice of a creditor, that Nathaniel signed those 400 acres over to you in July, when he already knew or ought to have known that the note was held against the whole property." Ammons laid the paper on the desk. "And he's got a second string to it, and Evelyn, I'll not soften this. He's pled that you're a woman of unsound and violent mind, and the deed ought to fall for that too. He's got 9 names on affidavits. Every one of them was in this yard the night you burned that dress." Nobody spoke. "Judge Ammons," Nathaniel said quietly. "Who signed those? I'll not have you riding around this county. Who signed them?" "Everybody you'd expect, and 2 you wouldn't," Ammons said. "Son, it doesn't matter. 9 people watched a young woman set fire to a wedding dress in front of 60 witnesses. They're not lying. That's the trouble with it. Every word of it's true." Evelyn picked up the paper and read it through twice slowly, and when she set it down, her hands were steady. "Then I'll want witnesses of my own," she said. "You'll want more than witnesses. You'll want to explain that fire to a room full of men in a way that doesn't sound like a fit of temper. And I have been on that bench 19 years, and I'm telling you it can't be done." "It can." "How?" "By telling them what was in the box," Evelyn said, "and by having somebody in that room who was standing on those stairs." Ammons went very still. "Miss Hayes." "Yes." "She won't do it." "Then she won't," Evelyn said. "But I promised her I'd ask, and I've been dreading it for 11 weeks, and I find I'd rather be told no by her than be saved by anybody else." She rode to the Hayes place at Buckingham on the 2nd of October. It was 31 miles. She went alone, and she got there at dusk, and Clara's father would not come out of the back room. Clara took her into the parlor and stood by the mantel with her arms folded. "Say it," Clara said. "You know what I've come for." "I've known since August. I've been sick with it since August." Clara's chin came up. "Ask me anyway, out loud. I want to hear a person ask me for something honest for once in my life. Miss Hayes, I need you to stand up in the Amherst County Court on Thursday and swear that Ansel Croft sent you to my husband's house to hold his attention, and that he did it to collect a debt of $11,000 from your father, and that you took my mother's wedding dress out of a cedar chest and put it on." Clara's face was white. "That last part," she said. "That last part is the one I need most." "Why?" "Because he's told a court I'm mad," Evelyn said, "and there is exactly one person alive who can tell them what was actually in that box, and why a woman would carry it into a yard and burn it, and it is not me. If I say it, I'm a wife excusing herself. If you say it, you are a woman confessing something that costs her everything." She stopped. "That's what I'm asking you for, and I want you to understand plainly that I'm asking you to be shamed in public to save my land. I've turned it over 100 ways, and there's no honest way to make it prettier than that." Clara laughed high and awful. "My father will be finished. Yes. We'll have to sell this house, probably. Everyone in 3 counties will know what I am." "They'll know what he made you," Evelyn said. "That's not the same thing, and the difference is the only gift I've got to give you, and it's a poor one." Clara turned and looked at the fire for a long time. "He came here in April," she said finally, "and he sat in that chair, that one right there, and he ate my mother's cake, and he told my father that a debt is a heavy thing. And when he'd gone, my father wouldn't look at me. Not for 3 days. He knew what had been arranged, and he ate his supper every night, and he could not look at his daughter." Her voice went thin. "I have wanted every single day since to be somebody that man could not move." "Then be her Thursday, and if I break down on the stand, then you'll break down in front of 100 people who have never once had to stand up in public and account for the worst thing they ever did," Evelyn said, "and I'll be sitting 8 feet away, and I will not look away from you. Not once. Not for a second." Clara Hayes put her hand over her mouth. 9 o'clock, she said. 9 o'clock. The other thing nearly came apart on the Wednesday. Evelyn came in from the mill at 7 in the evening, and Hattie met her at the door with her apron in her fists. "His wife's here." "Whose wife?" "Brooks's. Been in that back room 2 hours, and there's been shouting." Evelyn went down hall and stopped outside the door and did not open it because she could hear it plainly. "My own brother Samuel. You'll put my brother in the dock, and your girls will grow up in a county where there ain't a store that'll sell to 'em. I know what I'm doing, Martha." "You don't know a thing. You'll hang." "I might." "Then what happens to us?" His wife's voice broke apart entirely. "What happens to me? You did it for us. You took that money for us. Samuel Brooks, and now you want to stand up in a room full of men and tell them so. And for what? For her she'd not cross a road to spit on you." "There was a lamp burning in it." Silence. "What?" "The house that went by me in the water," Brooks said. "There was a lamp still burning in the window. Martha, I have shut my eyes every night for 6 weeks, and there it goes. And I don't know whose it was. I have asked around, and nobody's house is missing. So I reckon it was a shed or a smokehouse or my own eyes lying to me, and it don't make one particle of difference because for 3 days I believed I'd drowned a family, and I found out what I was." His voice cracked. "I turned a gate for $240 a year. I've buried a man's father and taught his boy to ride, and I turned a gate on 61 people because I was owed, and nobody had ever told me I wasn't. I ain't standing up Thursday for her. I'm standing up because I want my girls to hear it from me before they hear it from somebody in a store." Evelyn stepped back from the door and went out to the porch and sat down on the step in the dark and did not go into supper. Nathaniel found her there an hour later and sat down beside her close enough that their shoulders were touching, which was as far as either of them had gotten in 3 months. "You heard it," he said. "All of it." "So did I." They sat. "Nathaniel, if he says that on the stand, he'll be indicted before the week's out." "He knows." "He'll go to the penitentiary." "He knows that too. He asked me yesterday what they feed a man in Richmond." Nathaniel rubbed his hands over his face. "Do you want to know the thing I can't get past? He's not doing it to be forgiven. He hasn't asked me to forgive him one time. Not once in 6 weeks." "No," Evelyn said. "He asked me if that was all I wanted off him." "What did you say?" "I said the rest of it was between him and an 8-year-old boy." She looked at her hands. "I've thought about that about 400 times since, and I don't know if it was the hardest thing I've ever said or the kindest, and I've about decided it was both, and I'm not sure a person's allowed to be proud of that." The court sat at 9 o'clock on Thursday the 5th of October, and there were 140 people in a room built for 60. They came in wagons from up the creek. Reuel Tolliver came in a coat he'd been married in. Jubal Pyle came on his crutch with his wife and the baby, and Tom 8 years old and scrubbed until he shone. Ezra Buford came. Perlina Sims came and somebody gave up a seat for her in the front and she took it like it was owed. Evelyn Carter walked in carrying a canvas satchel with $6,200 in specie in it, and she walked to the clerk's table and set it down, and the sound it made stopped every conversation in that room. "Mr. Clerk, I'm here to tender payment on a note held against Whitmore of Amherst County in the sum of $6,200 and to have the tender entered on the record of this court." The clerk looked at Judge Ammons. Ammons looked at the room. "Count it," he said. It took 11 minutes to count it, and nobody in that room said a word for 11 minutes, and when the clerk got to the end he said, "6,200, Your Honor, and 40 cents over." "Where'd the 40 cents come from?" Ammons said. "It's the house money," Evelyn said. $311.40. It's been in my head since June, and I'd sooner keep it whole. Ansel Croft's counsel rose and said his client had no objection to the tender. "I imagine he don't," Ammons said. "Sit down. We'll take the bill in chancery." Croft's counsel took 2 hours, and he was good. He was very good. He laid out the deed of trust and the dates and the letter of May, and he made it sound so reasonable that Evelyn felt the room shift under her. A young woman, a failing estate, a husband signing away 400 acres in the middle of the night in front of a judge who had bought oats off her father for 11 years. Then he read the affidavits. Did set fire to a garment. In the presence of some 60 persons. Did decline to explain her conduct. Did seize a lady by the wrist and compel her behind an outbuilding. By the time he finished, 4 women in that room were looking at their laps. "Mrs. Whitmore," Ammons said, "do you want counsel?" "I do not." "You are entitled." Judge Ammons, "I've got a lawyer's fee in that satchel on your clerk's table, and I'd rather it went to the note." She stood. "I'd like to call Miss Clara Hayes." The whole room turned around at once. Clara Hayes walked up that aisle with her back straight and her face the color of paper, and she was sworn, and Evelyn asked her 4 questions. "Miss Hayes, why did you come to Amherst County in April?" "Because Ansel Croft asked me to." "For what purpose?" "To occupy Mr. Whitmore's attention." Clara's voice was small, but it did not shake. "My father owes Mr. Croft $11,000. He came to our house and told my father that a debt is a heavy thing, but that friendships lighten it." Someone at the back said something, and Ammons hit the desk once. "Miss Hayes," Evelyn said, "where did the dress come from?" Clara looked at her. Evelyn did not look away. Not once. Not for a second. "Out of a cedar chest at the foot of her bed," Clara said. "Mr. Whitmore had the key. He told me it was moldering in a box. It was her mother's wedding dress, and her mother is dead. And it was the only thing of hers left in the world. And I knew it was wrong the moment I put my arms in the sleeves, and I wore it down that staircase in front of the county anyway. She asked me to take it off, and I told her." Clara's chin came up, and she said it to the whole room. "I told her she had not been married, that she had been purchased." The silence in that courtroom went on for a long, long moment. "Miss Hayes," Evelyn said, "one more. When she burned it, what did she say to you first?" "She said, 'Get inside, you'll catch your death.'" Croft's counsel did not cross-examine. Samuel Brooks came in after the noon recess, with his arm still strapped, and his wife sitting in the second row, with her hands folded, and he was sworn, and he did not wait to be asked. "I opened the gate," he said. Ammons said, "Mr. Brooks, I'd advise you. Your Honor, I know what I'm doing, and I've had 6 weeks to quit doing it, and I ain't quit." Brooks looked straight ahead. "The night of the 18th of August at 9 o'clock, I opened the headgate on the old Beckwith race, 2 turns on the instruction of Ansel Croft, who has paid me $240 a year for 2 years into an account in my wife's maiden name at a house in Richmond, and who told me it would take the Whitmore bottomland and scare the tenants off, and that no court in Virginia calls rain a crime. The face of the gate give way. 4 miles of water come down that hollow on 61 people." His voice held. "I have got a broken arm out of it, and a boy alive out of a China berry tree, and I'd trade the boy against the arm any day of the week, and it don't square a thing." Ansel Croft rose halfway out of his chair, and his counsel put a hand on his arm. He was bound over that afternoon. Judge Ammons took 20 minutes and came back and said the tender was accepted and entered the note satisfied on the record of the court, and the bill in Chancery dismissed the deed of trust to stand on the ground that it was executed in open view before a judge and 60 witnesses, which he observed was a curious way to commit a fraud. On the question of the lady's mind, he said one sentence, and people in that county repeated it for 30 years. There is nothing unsound about a woman who burns a thing rather than let it be worn by the person who stole it. Ammon said, and I'd remind the gentleman who signed those affidavits that they were all standing in that yard eating her ham. Then he referred the matter of the gate to the grand jury and adjourned, and the room came apart. Evelyn Carter got out of that courthouse and got about 10 feet down the steps before Ansel Croft was standing in front of her. I was a smaller man than she'd imagined. That was the thing that struck her. Ordinary. 50-year-old, good coat, mild eyes, the sort of man you'd give directions to. Mrs. Whitmore. Carter. You've bought a wet farm, Croft said pleasantly. You understand that. Your bottomland's scoured to clay, and it'll take you 6 years to bring it back, and you've spent every dollar you own and your husband's watch to keep 400 acres of mud. I know what I bought. You'll be back here in 2 years. Mr. Croft, Evelyn said, there are 61 people behind me on those steps, and every last one of them is going to hear whatever you say next, so I'd choose it careful. He looked past her at this crowd, and for about a second and a half, Evelyn saw it, and she was the only one who did. Ansel Croft's face did the thing that Clara's had done on the stairs, and Nathaniel's in the office. It moved a quarter of an inch. Then he put his hat on and went down the steps and got in his trap and left Amherst County, and the grand jury indicted him on the 11th, and he did not come back. She found Nathaniel at the bottom of the steps, holding the empty satchel. It's done, he said. It started. Evelyn. 6 years to bring that bottom back. He wasn't lying about that part. She took the satchel out of his hands. And 19 families, and 140 acres of oak, and $1,100 owed on a book by people who lost their houses, and I'll not collect half of it, and I knew that when I wrote it. I know. And no horses, and no silver, and no watch. I know. So say what you came down here to say, she said, because you've had it in your mouth since the clerk said 40 cents over, and I'd rather you said it standing on a courthouse step than left it another 11 weeks. Nathaniel Whitmore stood there in front of half the county. I thought I married your land, he said. I said it to your face in my own office with your father's deed under my hand, and I meant it. And I have had 91 days to think about what kind of man says that out loud to his wife and takes no notice of her face when he does. He didn't look away. I was wrong. I didn't marry your land. I married the woman who could save it, and she did, and I had nothing to do with it except get out of her road. That's not true. It's near enough. It isn't. Evelyn's voice was low. You went into the pile house at midnight. You counted heads, and you remembered the names because I told you to, and you did it anyway when it would have been easier not to. You cut road for 4 days with your hands in ribbons. You sold your father's watch in a public street, and you didn't tell me and Nathaniel. You stood in that door in the barn, and you stopped me, and you were right, and it cost you something to be right, and I have not thanked you for it, and I'm doing it now. He couldn't answer for a moment. Then say you forgive me, he said. And Evelyn Carter looked at her husband a long time. No, she said. He nodded slowly. He'd been ready for it, she could see he'd been ready for it, but it went into him all the same. I believe you, she said. That's not nothing, Nathaniel. 3 months ago I didn't believe one word out of your mouth, and now I'd take your word in front of a judge, and I want you to understand, that's the biggest thing that's happened to me this year that didn't involve water. She shifted the satchel to her other hand. But I'm not going to say a word today that I'll have to take back in February. You've been a different man for 11 weeks. I've been a Carter for 24 years. Ask me again when the numbers are closer. When will they be closer? I don't know. Give me something to work toward. Anything. A year. 5. I can't. Evelyn, I can't. And if I made one up to be kind to you, it would be a lie. And I have had about all the polite lies I can hold. She stopped. softened it a little because he was standing there and taking it, and not one part of him was arguing. Nathaniel, you want me to tell you the ground's solid. It isn't yet. But you're welcome to keep standing on it and finding out, and I'm not going anywhere, and that is a great deal more than I could have said to you in July. Nathaniel Whitmore let out a breath. All right, he said. All right. Then I'll take the wagon round, and we'll go home, he said. And tomorrow, I'd like to know how a man goes about bringing 400 acres of clay back into wheat, because I have never in my life asked anybody how anything is done, and I find I'm out of practice. Evelyn almost smiled. 6 o'clock, she said. At the ford. Wear the boots you don't like. 6 o'clock at the ford and the boots he didn't like. And Nathaniel Whitmore stood in 400 acres of dried clay that had been the best bottomland in Amherst County 11 weeks earlier and said, "All right, how?" You want the short answer or the true one? The true one. 6 years, Evelyn said. Maybe 8. The flood took the topsoil off and laid it 400 yards downstream in somebody's sycamores, and what's left is subsoil. And subsoil won't make wheat if you pray over it every Sunday for a decade. Then what will it make? Nothing for 2 years, then clover, then rye, then clover again. She crouched and broke a clod in her hand. You put stock on it and let them dung it, and you turn the clover under green, and you do that 4 or 5 times. And at the end of it, if you've been patient and lucky, you've got about 6 inches of dirt where there wasn't any. 6 inches. 6 inches in 8 years. Nathaniel looked out across it. My father, he said, would have sold it in March. Your father would have been wrong. That's the first time anybody's ever said that to me out loud. He said it without heat, almost with wonder. 19 years Samuel Brooks worked for that man, and he'd have cut his own hand off before he said it. Then I'll say it as often as it wants saying. Evelyn stood and dusted her palms. Now go tell Ruel Tolliver we need every hoof on this place standing in this bottom by Saturday, and be ready for him to tell you it's madness, and when he does, don't argue with him. Ask him what he'd do instead. And if what he'd do instead is better, then we'll do it, Evelyn said, and you'll have learned the whole trick of the thing in one morning, and I'll have wasted 8 years finding it out the hard way. Tolliver said it was madness. Then he stood there turning it over for a good half-minute, and said that if they were going to put stock on it anyway, they might as well run the hogs through the sycamore drift first, and let them root the mast and then move them up, because there was 400 yards of the bottom's own dirt lying down there in a windrow, and it was ridiculous to leave it where the water had put it. Nathaniel came back at noon and reported it word for word. Well, Evelyn said, was he right? I was so right I want to lie down. She was already reaching for her hat. 8 men, 2 wagons, and every basket in the county. We're going to carry that field back up the hill by hand. They carried dirt for 19 days. That was the winter of 1815 in Amherst County, and people talked about it afterward, the way people talk about a war. They were in the Whitmore hands and the Carter tenants, hauling their own topsoil back out of a stand of sycamores, 400 yards at a time in the cold, in wagons and baskets, and once in a woman's apron, and Perlina Sims sending down 2 pots of soup a day on a mule, because she said she'd be damned if anybody starved improving property she had a note against. They got back maybe an acre's worth, maybe 2. It didn't matter, and Evelyn knew it didn't matter, and she never once said so, because on the 9th day, Amos Tolliver looked up from a basket and said, "This here's the same dirt, ain't it? This is the dirt your daddy cleared." "It's the same dirt." "Then it ain't lost," the boy said. "It just moved." Evelyn had to go stand behind a wagon for a minute. The book came due at Christmas. $1,140 owed by 90-some families for lumber, sold at $2 down out of the back of a wagon in September, and Evelyn had told Ezra Buford in August that she'd not collect half of it and had believed every word. 68 families came in the first week. They came on foot and in traps, and one man walked 11 miles with $4 in a sock, and Evelyn sat at a table in the mill house with the book open and wrote paid in full 91 times before New Year's, and on the 2nd of January she counted it and got $980 and had to put her head in her hands. "That ain't possible," Buford said. "It's on the page." "Ma'am, I've sold lumber on credit to my own church and got 70 cents on the dollar. "They're not paying for lumber," Evelyn said. "No," the old man agreed. "No, they ain't. 9 families couldn't pay, and 8 of them came anyway to say so to her face, which she thought was the hardest thing a person could do, and told them so. The 9th was a man named Ott Pryor, from up past the Forks, who sent his wife instead, and the woman stood in the door of that mill house with 2 children and could not get a word out. "Mrs. Pryor." "He'd have come himself. He can't. How much is it?" $19. The woman's face was scarlet. "We had it in October, and the baby took sick, and there was the doctor from New Glasgow." "Which baby?" The woman blinked. "Ma'am." "Which one? You've got 4. "The littlest. Nan." "Is Nan all right?" And the woman came apart entirely, standing up the way people do when somebody asks the question they've been carrying instead of the one they came about. Evelyn got her into a chair and got tea into her and got the whole thing: the fever, the doctor, the $11, the husband who hadn't slept, and then she turned the book around and drew one line through $19 and wrote in the margin, "Nan Pryor, October 1815, and turned it back. "That's paid." "Ma'am, I can't." "Mrs. Pryor, you can argue with me, or you can get home to your children before dark, and it's 4 miles, and it's January." The woman looked at the line through her name. "Why'd you write her name in it?" "Because in 30 years, somebody's going to read this book," Evelyn said, "and I want them to know what it went for." Samuel Brooks was tried on the 4th of February and pled guilty before his counsel could stop him. Croft had gone. Indicted on the 11th of October, gone from the Eagle by the 12th and Amherst County, never saw him again. He was reported in Baltimore, then Philadelphia, then nowhere, and his lands in the county went to the sheriff's sale in March to satisfy the debts of a man who had spent 2 years buying everything in sight on paper. But Brooks was there in a coat brushed clean with his arm out of the strap, and his wife in the second row, and his 2 girls beside her in their church dresses, and he stood up in that room and said it again from the beginning, without one word changed from October. Then the Commonwealth's attorney rose to speak to the sentence, and Judge Ammons said, "Before you do, Mrs. Whitmore, you had something to hand up." The room turned. Evelyn Carter walked to the bar and gave the clerk 2 pages in her own hand. "What is it?" Ammons said. "An account, Your Honor, of the night of the 18th of August. Written out by me and signed by Jubal Pyle and by his wife." Brooks's head came around, and he looked at her, and there was nothing at all in his face but bewilderment. "Read the last part," Ammons said. The clerk read it. It was 4 sentences. It said that at 20 minutes past midnight, in 9 feet of moving water, with a broken left arm, Samuel Brooks had held an 8-year-old boy named Thomas Pyle out of the current on his shoulder until men could reach him, and had refused to be taken out first, and that the boy was alive that day and in the courtroom, 3rd row. Ammons looked over his spectacles. "Is the boy here?" Tom Pyle stood up because his mother made him. The room made a sound. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, "the court would like to understand what it's being asked." "Nothing, Your Honor. Nothing. I'm not asking you for one thing. I'm not asking mercy, and I'd not know how to ask it if I wanted to. He opened that gate, and my father's field is clay, and I'll be 8 years getting it back, and I have not forgiven him, and I do not expect to." Evelyn's voice was flat and clear. "But that account is true, and it happened, and it would have gone in nobody's book if I hadn't put it in one. That's all. Whatever the law does with him, I'd sooner it did it knowing everything than knowing half." Ammons was quiet a moment. "Sit down, ma'am," he said, and it was not unkind. He gave Brooks 3 years in the penitentiary at Richmond, which was less than the Commonwealth asked, and more than the man's wife could stand. And when they took him out, Martha Brooks went after Evelyn in the aisle with her face wrecked and her hands shaking and said, "Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that after what he done to you?" "Because it was true. You could have kept it in your pocket. Nobody'd have known." "I'd have known," Evelyn said. "Mrs. Brooks, the house you're in is Whitmore's, and I'll not put you out of it, and there's work in the kitchen if you want it, and none if you don't. And either way, your girls will be fed out of that place until he's home. That's not charity, and it's not kindness. It's what's owed. I'll thank you not to make a speech about it because I can't take much more today." Martha Brooks stood in that aisle, and could not answer her. Crofts' ground came up at the sheriff's sale on the 11th of March, and there were 9 parcels, and one of them was the old Beckwith tract with a stone headgate on it and 4 miles of hollow behind. It went at $260, and Evelyn Carter did not bid on it. 19 tenant families did. Ruel Tolliver bid it standing on a mounting block in front of the courthouse in his wedding coat with a leather pouch in his fist, and Mary Tolliver's hand on his elbow. And the money in that pouch was the road share's 2 years of 2% divided. 19 weighs $180-some out of coffee tins and under mattresses, and Buford put in 40, and Jubal Pyle sold a heifer, and Widow Hale put in $11 that Pryor had earned honest, and the last 30 came out of Perlina Sims's reticule at the last minute, because a man from Lynchburg went 1 bid too many, and she said loud enough for the whole square to hear, "Give it to me, Ruel. I'm 81, and I don't care what anybody thinks." The auctioneer had to ask 3 times who was buying. "Us," Tolliver said. "I need a name, sir." "There's 19 names. Judge Ammons has got 'em wrote out, and he says it'll stand." They tore the gate out on a Saturday. Every man on the creek came, and a good many women, and Nathaniel Whitmore worked the second sledge and Amos Tolliver got the first swing, because Ruel said he'd earned it, and when the last of the stonework let go, and 4 miles of dead pond ran down that hollow, clean and harmless in the middle of a wet March, 60-odd people stood on the bank and hollered themselves hoarse. Evelyn didn't holler. She stood at the back with her arms folded and watched water go where water goes, and Ezra Buford came and stood beside her and said, "You could have bought that yourself. $260. You had it by then." "I know." "Why didn't you?" "Because if I own it, they're safe," Evelyn said. "And if they own it, they're free." And those are different words. Mr. Buford and I did not understand the difference until about the middle of last August. Clara Hayes's father sold his house in April. Evelyn heard about it in a store in Amherst Courthouse from a woman who told it the way people tell things they're enjoying, and rode 31 miles that same week, and found Clara in 2 rented rooms above a saddler's shop with a trunk still unopened in the corner. "I don't want your pity." "You'd not get it. I've none spare." "Then what?" "Work," Evelyn said. Clara laughed. "Doing what I can pour tea, play 4 pieces badly, and ruin a woman's life at a summer supper. You can read, write a clean hand and cipher. Every lady can." Mrs. Whitmore, Evelyn said, cannot. Nor Mary Tolliver, nor Widow Hale, nor 60-some people on that creek. And every single one of them put a mark on a timber contract last summer instead of a name. And Amos Tolliver taught himself off a court paper because there was nobody to teach him. She put her hands flat on the table. "There's a shed at Buford's mill nobody's using. $20 a quarter, which is a disgrace of a wage, and you're bored with Hattie, and about 30 children who'll come when the work's slack, and not come when it isn't. And half the men in that valley will say, a school is a foolishness, until the day one of their boys reads a contract and finds the trick in it." Clara stared at her. "You want me to teach?" "I want somebody to teach, and you're who I've got." "Evelyn." Clara's voice went unsteady. "They know what I did, all of them. That courtroom was full." "Yes." "Mothers will not send their children to a woman who—" "Perlina Sims will send her granddaughter the first day," Evelyn said, "and she will tell the entire county she has done it at volume, and after that you'll have your 30. Clara turned her face away. "Why?" she said. "And don't tell me it's because you're good, because I've watched you cut a man's life in half at a courthouse and not blink." Evelyn thought about it honestly, because she owed her that. "Because you stood up in a room and said the worst true thing about yourself out loud, when a lie would have cost you nothing," she said. "There's maybe 4 people I've ever met who'd do that, and 2 of them are in a penitentiary or a graveyard, and I find I'm not rich enough to waste one." Clara Hayes came in June. She had 11 pupils the first week and 34 by September, and by the winter of 1817, she was teaching the mothers on Tuesday evenings, and she never married, and she was the second most feared woman in Amherst County for the next 40 years. Perlina Sims was paid back on the 1st of May, $412 and 6% in specie, on her own porch, with the paper marked satisfied and her whole name spelled right. She counted it because she was that kind of woman. "There," she said. "Now I've had a return on an investment. 81 years old. Put that in a book somewhere." She died in the January of 1818 in her own bed in a house that had been put back straight and square with white oak off the north line, and she left her 60 acres to be held in trust for the cart road forever, and a note for Evelyn that Clara had to read out loud because nobody else could get through it. It said, "Girl, you asked me once if I was worth the trouble. Ask the next one too. P. Sims." Evelyn kept it in the front of the ledger the rest of her life. The bottomland made clover in 1817, and rye in 1818, and clover again in 1819, and every one of those years the numbers were awful, and every one of those years Nathaniel Whitmore came in from that field at dark, and washed at the pump, and sat down at the desk across from his wife, and asked her to show him the figures. I was not good at it. That was the truth of it, and he knew it, and he made himself do it anyway. "You've got the corn in twice," Evelyn said. "I have not." Second column, third line, and again at the bottom. He looked. He put his hand over his face. 4 years, he said. 4 years, and I still cannot keep a column straight. You keep men straight. That's not the same. No, Evelyn agreed. It's harder, and it's the half of this I'd give away if I could. She turned the page. Ruel Tolliver would walk off this place tomorrow if I asked him to, and stay forever if you did. And the reason is that you cut road with him for 4 days in July of 1815, with your hands in ribbons, and never once said a word about it after. That was 91 days of my life. It was the 91 days everybody was watching. He was quiet a moment. "Do you know what he said to me?" Nathaniel said, "at the horse sale, when Croft's man bought the bay. He told me, 'Any fool can lose a thing.' He told you. Nathaniel, I have known everything that happens on this land since about the second week of June, 1815. Evelyn said, and you'd be amazed at what men will say to a woman with a ledger. Christmas of 1818. They held the supper in the yard because there were too many for the house, and there were 4 long tables and 110 people, and Hattie Doyle running the whole thing like a general. Ruel Tolliver stood up on a chair before the food, which nobody had ever seen him do. 'Now I ain't but going to get through this once,' he said, so everybody quit chewing." Nathaniel at the end of the table looked at his wife. She shook her head. She didn't know. 4 years ago in this yard," Tolliver said, "there was a supper and a fire, and the worst night any of us ever had. And there was a fellow standing where he's sitting right now, who most of us reckoned was a rich man's son and nothing else." He turned his hat over in his hands. "In October of that year, that fellow sold his daddy's watch in the street at Amherst Courthouse for $91 to pay a note on ground that wasn't going to feed him for 8 years, and he never told his wife, and he never told none of us, and he's reached for that pocket about 9,000 times since and thought nobody seen him do it." Nathaniel had gone completely white. "Ruel, setting down Mr. Whitmore, I ain't done." Tolliver reached in his coat. "Amos found who bought it. Took him 2 years. Fellow in Lynchburg, and he wanted $11 over what he paid. And Coy Meacham said that was robbery and paid it anyhow. He held it out. 19 houses and 11 hands. Every one of 'em in it. Wasn't a soul asked twice. Nobody at those tables said one word." Nathaniel Whitmore stood up and took his father's watch out of Ruel Tolliver's hand and could not speak at all. He tried twice. The second time he got out about half of "I don't." And then he put his hand over his eyes and stood there in front of 110 people and wept openly and did not turn away and did not go inside. Evelyn, 4 feet away, did not go to him. She let him have it. She had learned that much about him by then, that a man who has spent 30 years never being allowed to want anything out loud has to be permitted to break in the open the first time, or it doesn't take. When he could talk, he said, "It kept time for somebody else for 3 years. "Yes, sir," Tolliver said, "and it's come back. That's about the size of it." "Ruel." Nathaniel's voice was in pieces. "I have not earned this." "No, sir." Ruel Tolliver said, "You ain't, and there ain't a man at these tables earned what he got out of that road neither. And if we all got what we earned, this yard'd be empty. Set down and eat." The bottomland made wheat in the summer of 1820. Not a good crop. 13 bushels to the acre, where her father used to make 26 on the first 40 acres on the piece nearest the old ford, 5 years of clover and rye and hogs and hauled dirt and 100 small stubbornnesses and 13 bushels. Evelyn walked out into it at 6 o'clock on a July morning by herself and stood in wheat up past her knees on ground that had been clay and put her hand down flat on the heads of it and said out loud to nobody, "There, Daddy." She was still there 20 minutes later when Nathaniel came down the rise. "How much? 13? 13. He said it carefully because he had learned to be careful with numbers around her. "Is that good?" "It's the best thing that has ever happened to me." "Evelyn, 13 bushels. Nathaniel." She turned around. 5 years ago, there was a dead heifer in my father's fence and 400 yards of my dirt in another man's sycamores, and a man in Richmond who told me on a courthouse step I'd be back in 2 years. Her eyes were streaming, and she did not appear to have noticed. 13 bushels. He came and stood beside her in it. "Then ask me," he said. "Ask you what?" "You said ask me again when the numbers are closer." He was looking straight ahead at the field. "That was the 5th of October, 1815 on the courthouse steps, and I have not said one word about it in 4 years and 9 months, and I want you to know I could go another 4 and it wouldn't kill me. But the numbers are closer, Evelyn, and I'm 40 next spring. And I would like one time to ask my wife a question and not already know she's going to say no." Evelyn Carter stood in 13 bushels of wheat and did not answer him for a long moment. "Ask it then." He turned. "I'd like to be married to you," Nathaniel said. "Not the arrangement. Not the paper Judge Ammons drew at a table with the county standing around. I'd like to stand up in front of the same people who watched me hand another woman your mother's dress and say it again and mean it this time, and I would like you to have the choosing of it, which you never had once, and if I say no, then I'll be here at 6 o'clock at that ford tomorrow morning, the same as I have been for 1,700 and some days," he said, "and I'll not raise it again, and I'll not sulk about it, and if you want to know the truth, I'd count myself the luckiest man in this county either way, because I have seen what my life looked like when you weren't in it, and it was 412 acres and a steward robbing me blind." Evelyn looked at him. 5 years. The hands that had gone to ribbons on an axe handle and never gone soft again. The pocket he still reached for out of habit. The man who had carried a pregnant woman 300 yards through a river and then stood in a barn door and taken the worst thing she could say to him and been right anyway. "Yes," she said. Nathaniel Whitmore did not move. "Say it again." "Yes, Nathaniel. Because if you're being kind to me—" "I have never once been kind to you," Evelyn said, "and I don't intend to start in a wheat field." They were married the second time on the 9th of September, 1820, in the yard on the bare patch. Nothing had grown on it in 5 years. That was the strange thing, and people had remarked on it a scorched circle about the size of a wagon wheel that took no grass, no matter what anybody did. And Hattie had said more than once that it wasn't natural, and Evelyn had said it was lye from the ash, and Hattie had said she knew what she knew. They put the table over it. 160 people came. Ezra Buford came at 76 with a stick. Jubal Pyle came on his crutch, and Tom Pyle, 13, now stood up at the front where he could see. Clara Hayes came with 34 pupils in 2 lines, and the smallest of them dropped the flowers. Martha Brooks came and sat in the back with her girls, and nobody said a word about it, because that had been settled a long time before by a woman with a ledger. Evelyn Carter did not wear silk. 19 women had made the dress over 4 months in 19 houses, and it was plain gray wool with a worked hem. Mary Tolliver had done the hem badly because her eyes had gone the way Ruth Carter's had gone, and there were 19 names stitched inside the waistband, in 19 different hands, and 4 of them were marks, and Clara had put those in herself with the woman's own finger on the needle. Hattie fastened it and then had to sit down on the bed. "Ma'am." "Don't. I ain't going to." Hattie wiped her face with her apron. "I just want to say, I stood in that kitchen 5 years ago, and I told you Miss Hayes had took the dress, and I couldn't look at you. I remember. I have thought about that morning every day since." "Hattie Doyle, you told me the truth when it would have been safer to say you didn't know," Evelyn said. "Everything that has happened on this place happened because you did that. Now get up and fix my hair, Because there are 160 people out there, and I'll not be late to my own wedding twice. The preacher from Amherst Courthouse asked at the proper place who gave this woman, and Reuel Tolliver said, "Nobody does," so loud that people laughed, and then he cleared his throat and said, "Beg pardon, Reverend. What I mean is, she ain't nobody's to give. But there's 160 of us standing here, and we'd all be someplace worse if she hadn't stayed. So if you got to write something down, write that." Samuel Brooks came home in February of 1819 and did not come up the drive for 11 days. When he did, he stood in the yard with his hat in his hand and would not come past the gate, and Evelyn went out to him because she had known for 11 days that he was in that county and had been waiting to see how long it took him. "Ma'am." "Mr. Brooks." "I ain't come for work." "That's good, because you'd not get the house, and you'd not get the ledgers, and you'd not get within 100 yards of a payroll." "No, ma'am." His mouth moved. "I know it." "What did you come for?" "To say I done it." He looked at the ground and then made himself look up. "That's all. I said it to a judge, and I said it to my girls, and I ain't never said it to you standing on my own 2 feet. And a man told me in Richmond that if you don't say it to the one you done it to, you ain't said it." Evelyn let that stand a moment. "There's 1.5 miles of road out there," she said, "and it wants keeping. Ditches, culverts, the fords after every rain. 19 families own it, and not one of them has got time for it. It's $40 a quarter, and there's no house with it, and you'd answer to Amos Tolliver, who is 21 years old, and learn to read off a contract you tried to keep him out of." Brooks stood there. "Amos Tolliver," he said. "Amos Tolliver. That boy stood up in a yard and told me not to put my hand on you." "He did." "I remember thinking he'd want watching." "He did want watching," Evelyn said. "I've been watching him for 5 years, and he's the best hand on this creek, and he'll have my job when I'm too old to walk it. Do you want the road or not, Mr. Brooks?" Samuel Brooks took the road. He kept it for 11 years, and the fords on that creek were the best maintained in the county, and he never once set foot in the Whitmore office. And when he died in 1831, there were 40 people at the burying, which was more than he'd expected, and fewer than his wife had hoped, and Amos Tolliver was one of them. By 1830, the place was called Carter Whitmore, which nobody had decided, and everybody said. 412 acres of bottomland, running 24 bushels to the acre. A mill with a school shed beside it. A cart road held in trust by 19 families, 7 of whom by then owned the ground under their own houses, because Evelyn had sold it to them at cost in the good year of 1824 and taken 20 years to be paid and been paid. There were 3 children in that house, and the middle one was a girl named Ruth, and when she was 9 years old, her mother sat her on a fence rail at the ford and made her repeat back where the water went in a flood, and why the bottom was rich, and what a man in Richmond would want with a creek, until she had it by heart. Why do I got to know this? Because a man can take your money, and a fire can take your house. But nobody on God's earth can take what you know, the child said, bored, swinging her heels. You say it every time. Then you'll say it every time to yours, Evelyn said. And one day, you'll be standing in a room full of men who've decided what your life is for, and you'll find out why. Nathaniel Whitmore lived to be 71 and wore his father's watch every day of it. He never did learn to keep a column straight. He learned other things. He learned to ask a man how a thing was done before telling him how it ought to be. And he learned to say, I was wrong out loud in a yard. And he learned slowly over about 15 years, and imperfectly, to stop reaching for the credit of what his wife had built. Until one day, a young man from Richmond stood in that yard and complimented him on his fine plantation. And Nathaniel said without any particular emphasis, It's not mine, it's hers. I married her for 400 acres, and she saved 940 and about 61 people. And if you want the story of this place, you'll have to ask her, because every word I could tell you would be second-hand. The young man laughed, thinking it was modesty. Reuel Tolliver, standing at the fence, did not laugh because he had been there. Evelyn Carter died in the spring of 1867 at 76 in the house with a ledger on the table beside the bed, and the last entry in her own hand was from 11 days before, and it said, Ott Pryor Giar, son paid $19. Says his Aunt Nan told him it was owed. Told him it was not. He left it on the table. Underneath, in a hand that shook, refused it. He left it anyway. That is the whole story of this place. They buried her on the hill above the bottomland, next to her father, and there were 300 people, and the county paper ran 4 lines, because the county paper never did understand what had happened out there. But every family on that creek knew. They knew that in the summer of 1815, a young woman stood in a yard in front of 60 people and burned the last thing her mother ever made, rather than let it be worn by the person who took it, and that she did not do it out of temper, and she did not do it for a man, and she did not do it to be admired. She did it because there are things a person will not let be spent, and everything she built after the road and the school and the deed with 19 names on it, and the 6 inches of dirt that took 8 years, came out of that one match struck on the sole of her shoe, on the worst evening of her life, in front of everybody. Her father had told her once that a man can take your money and a fire can take your house, but nobody on God's earth can take what you know. He'd been wrong about one thing, and she'd figured it out somewhere between the flood and the courthouse and never got the chance to tell him. They can't take what you give either. That's the only part of a person's life that nobody ever gets to sell.